partial federal and state funding. If the state wins another grant this spring, dedicated funds so far would total roughly $2 billion. Jeanette Barnes, GBH News, 89.7.
In sports, the Celtics and Bruins continue their playoff runs this evening. The Celtics host the Heat at the Garden. Gang Green leads that series 1-0. Bruins in Toronto for Game 3 of their series with the Maple Leafs. That series is tied at 1-1. And the Red Sox are playing the Guardians in Cleveland tonight. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from the Kids Mental Health Foundation, with a mission to make mental health a vital part of every child's upbringing, offering child mental health tools and resources for parents, classrooms, and workplaces at kidsmentalhealthfoundation.org.
Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you. We'll be back here on Friday as well, and also on May 3rd, we're going to have a special, we're going to hit the road, Jim. We're going to broadcast live from UMass Boston over in Dorchester. If you haven't been to that campus, it is absolutely beautiful. Gorgeous. It's right on the water. They have all these big glass windows overlooking.
Great school, too.
It is a great school as well. And it's reasonably priced compared to a lot of others, too. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're going to be at UMass Boston with an hour of Ask the Governor with Maura Healey and the former head of the EPA for Barack Obama, Gina McCarthy. Can't wait to talk to her. Everybody is welcome to attend, and as usual, no tickets needed. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. But for now, we're talking about the fraught state of pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses and how it highlights where we are as a country on the conflict in Gaza. As you know, New York police stepped in to arrest, I think it was 200 plus students at Columbia, but it hasn't done much to calm the situation. I'm sure it's not going to get better when the Speaker of the House shows up, I assume, to make Donald Trump happy. Here in Boston, demonstrations and encampments are popping up at Emerson and MIT. I drove by one at MIT on Mass Avenue this morning, while Harvard's gone so far as to temporarily ban non-students from visiting Harvard Yard. So our questions to you are several. You can call or text 877-301-8970. With all the pushback these pro-Palestinian student protesters are getting, how is a well-meaning, non-violent person who cares about the plight of the innocent Palestinian people expected to protest? And I guess much more importantly, why can't we have protests on campus to support an end to the violence while at the same time ensuring the safety of students, including Jewish students? The number is 877-301-8970. I will answer my own question, Marjorie.
Okay, go right
and the
ahead.
reason we can't is because the bulk of these college presidents are feckless people, have become cowards. And as we discussed with Khalil Gibran Muhammad the other day from the Kennedy School, they're not running their schools. The people running their schools are rich donors, Virginia Fox, the MAGA chair of the House Education Committee, and Elise Stefanik, a MAGA sycophant from New York State. They've essentially ceded their authority to run a safe campus where nonviolent protest is not only permitted, but I would argue should be encouraged.
Well, you have to wonder what the Speaker of the House is doing, going to Columbia University.
I don't.
I mean,
it's for Trump.
Yeah.
He upset Trump because he did the Ukraine stuff, so he's gone there to do Trump's bidding to say how horrible the demonstrators are.
I mean, it goes without saying you don't want anybody to be afraid on campus. You don't want Jewish kids to be afraid on campus. But just because you were having a protest to end the violence, a lot of them are asking these universities to divest from Israel, which is a different thing.
Well, they're entitled to ask that too.
They're entitled.
You don't have to agree with it.
You don't have to agree with that. I mean, that's been, I think there years ago, people may remember, certain old enough, the pressure on universities to divest from South Africa because of apartheid there many, many years ago. So anyway, you don't want anybody to be afraid. On the other hand, is there, as you just said, is there something wrong with having a protest to end the violence in Gaza? And they're not necessarily full of hate. I mean, a lot of these kids say there have been peaceful protests. We just heard the top of the news talked about protests at the University of Michigan and other places where they have been peaceful. And some of the kids at these campuses say that the extremists are not necessarily the kids that are on campus. There's a lot of, as we used to call them, outside agitators, Jim, coming in causing trouble. And as some kids, Jewish kids actually, at Columbia said that the extreme stuff is getting emphasized in the media, and that's us, and that's our fault. But there has been a lot of very peaceful protesting at their school.
I, with the exception of maybe Columbia, and I'm sure there are other examples that I may have forgotten, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with kowtowing to these anti-free speech Republican lunatics in Congress. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, look at what happened. Elise Stefanik, who, let me be respectful, is a little short on brains. In addition to that, was a moderate Republican. She decided to hitch her wagon to Donald Trump, and now she's become a lunatic right-winger. And what she does is she calls for the resignation of elite university presidents, and some of them obviously resign, as we know, or forced to step down. It may happen to the Columbia president. And the thing, I think the most telling thing that's happened on the show, was it this week? We were speaking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and I asked him the question about, can you name one university president who has the courage to stand up to these people in Washington? And his answer was no. And in fact, he had lunch, he said, with another academic who has written a book about college presidents. He asked him that question. He couldn't identify one. This is, I'm telling you, these campuses run in an effort to placate the lunatics on the Republican side of the House of Representatives.
And it's also big money donors.
Yeah,
totally.
We
talked about that guy over at Harvard, Bill his name is, that went after them. And you have closer to home here, Robert Kraft, one of the New England Patriots, is an alumnus of Columbia. This is what he said. He's no longer going to support the school until a corrective action is taken there. This is Columbia. He says, "It is my hope that Columbia and its leadership will stand up to this hate by ending these protests immediately." And as I said, they're not all about hate. I mean, I don't know that you can say that they're all about hate. And he wants these protests to end immediately, I guess, whether they're peaceful protests or not.
Well, you know, I don't know enough about the Kraft situation. I mean, if you're given money and you choose not to give it, that is totally your right. The issue is how far do you insinuate yourself in the running of the university? And at least from what I've read about Ackman at Harvard, he did. I don't know if Kraft is doing anything more than saying, I'm just not comfortable giving. If that's all it is, a donor is entitled to do whatever the hell they want. But college presidents and college boards of trustees should have the courage to stand up to donors if standing up to them is the right thing to do to protect freedom for people and security for other people. And secondly, someone's got to stand. By the way, when was the last time? I'll ask Juliette Kayyem this. I'm sure it'll make her happy since she works part-time at Harvard. What the hell happened to the interim president of Harvard, Alan Garber? Is he like in the basement somewhere? I mean, is he going to say anything about any of these things?
Yeah.
I mean, it is really, it's an exercise in cowardice, in my opinion. And again, let's say it so you don't have to say it to us. Two things, once again, can exist at the same time, which is the freedom to protest something you are not happy with, in this case, the killing of innocent Palestinians, at the same time that you ensure the safety both in their minds and their bodies of particularly Jewish students who feel threatened on these campuses.
And the thing about Elise Stefanik is that there is a considerable hypocrisy there. She was not going to the microphones to defend or to be horrified about the Jews Will Not Replace Us march in Charlottesville, where the former president said there were good people on both sides, and she wasn't rushing out to criticize Trump for dining with neo-Nazis.
Of course. 877, and she wants to be vice president, which apparently she has a chance of being. By the way, the Harvard Crimson is reporting this morning, thank you, our colleagues. Alan Garber, who's the interim president, so far escaped an invitation to testify before the House Committee on Education and Workforce, but if asked, he would say yes, quote, if I'm called to testify before Congress, I intend to do so.
You know, why is it only the Ivy League schools that are getting dragged in before Congress?
Because to the right wing in Congress, the Ivy League schools are the ultimate elite institutions. And so, I mean, it's also a notch on their, what is that expression? Their belt.
Yes.
You know, to get some of them to step down or whatever it is. 877-301-8970.
Judy from Newburyport, thank you for calling.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, I couldn't agree more with both of you, and I wanted to tell you a story. We took our grandson to Ithaca College over the weekend, and it was an all-day welcoming, open house kind of thing. And when we were at the welcome ceremony, right at the beginning, there was a student protest. They came into the auditorium, and they did a lie-in, and the president stopped talking. She explained that it is their policy to allow peaceful protesting, and she was going to let it happen. They had signs. They didn't disrupt. They were completely respectful, and she allowed it to go on, and we couldn't have been more pleased.
Wow.
And throughout the day, as we continued, we were there for like 7 hours, they were everywhere. And sometimes they were chanting when they were outside, but they were never disruptive. They were never hateful. And as long as there is no hate-filled speech or anti-Semitism, they should be allowed to do it.
That's a fabulous with and good for the president of Ithaca College, and it's a good place for your kid to be. Thanks, your grandkid. Judy, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Sarah in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I feel like there needs to be some protesting where people are just wearing T-shirts with both sides, asking for peace, not even saying whether they support one side or the other, just asking for peace for both.
That's a good idea, Sarah. I think that's what, we just heard before in the news horrific stories out of Gaza about a baby being taken out 2 months premature out of the mother's belly. The mother and the siblings are all dead, and this baby has dead parents. And we saw on television the kids playing foosball last week in a refugee camp that were 7 and 8 and 9 years old, 7 of them just dead. And now we have Israel telling the Palestinians to move again to safe places before they attack Rafah, but they've told them to move to safe places before and attack the safe places.
Well, also hostages. There's still 100, assuming they're alive, 100 plus hostages that need attention. And it doesn't seem to me, and I think I'm joined by tens of thousands of Israeli protesters, that Netanyahu cares about this. He cares about focusing on the situation with Iran, which I understand, which helps deflect attention away from what he's doing in Gaza. But Sarah, I think you make a wonderful point. This is, again, getting back to the thing we say 1,000 times. Two things can be true and are true at the same time. Sarah, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
Here's Caitlin and Clinton. You can be pro-Palestine and anti-Hamas. You can be pro-Israel and anti-Israeli policy. Our nation's fixation on picking sides and staying there is going to destroy us. It already is. We no longer allow conversations on any subject. Right. We just pick a side and refuse to budge.
And then attack the other side. That's the other thing we do, is we attack we attack the other side.
And if you think of the gruesome Hamas situation, October 7th, and you think that a lot of the leaders of Hamas are nowhere near Gaza. Mm-hmm. They're often other countries. I don't know what Netanyahu is doing about that. Anyway, let's go to MJ in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Go.
Oh, great. I just wanted to bring to the conversation the aspect that most students are protesting, from what I've learned in my discussions, is protesting Zionism and the extreme aspect of this form. And, people are also upset about Hamas. So it's more about that than it is some kind of anti-Semitic generalization. And I think that's a really key point that we need to keep remembering as we have this conversation.
Yeah, but there have been a lot of harassment, physical harassment of Jewish kids too at these schools too, which you can't deny. The woman that talked about being afraid to go to the Passover celebration at Hillel, because Hillel was close to, that was at Columbia, I think, where it was close to the demonstration,
I thought it was MIT, but wherever
MIT,
it was, yeah.
So there is a lot of real anti-Semitism out there, and supposedly, according to government figures, the numbers of attacks have increased dramatically since October 7th. So there's
well, also,
hostility.
even if they're not overt threats, if kids feel unsafe, if Jewish kids on campuses feel unsafe, it's an obligation of leadership to make them feel as safe as is humanly possible without stepping on the rights of others to have their say. MJ, thank you for the call. By the way, Audrey in Boston texts, and we said this during the initial hearings, not only Ivy League presidents, also only female presidents. And that really, that's probably why Alan Garber, the interim president of Harvard, hasn't been invited, because he's a man. I mean, isn't this, by the way, I think Audrey's right.
They've all been women.
McGill, the president of MIT, and Claudine Gay were the first group. Then it was the president of Columbia the other day. Who was on the panel with wasn't there a guy in there? Was there But essentially, Audrey nailed it. That is exactly right, which is not surprising, considering who the attacks are coming from.
Here's a text. We support Robert Kraft's decision and a statement. These university protesters should take their protests off campus to some public place. They're literally stealing time and freedom of movement from other students and staff, pushing their politics belong somewhere else, not on campus.
Well, I could not disagree more. I mean, if a college campus is not a place where you can speak your damn mind, then no place is. John and Gardner, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hey.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Marjorie, that text said it perfectly about you can be pro-Palestinian and anti-Hamas.
Yeah.
And you can be, anti-Israeli tactics, which I think is the great preponderance of people are anti-Israeli tactics, not anti-Israel.
I agree with all that.
I wish this generation, and it might take another generation before we start thinking more of Israel as a nation. Well, it's a Jewish state, but I mean, I have nothing against Israelis or Jewish people, but I can't stand Netanyahu and his right-wing government and what they're spewing, right? And speaking in the media coverage, on where, anti-Israel is put out there rather than pro-Palestinian. And when they do say pro-Palestinian, they slide right into pro-Hamas.
Of course.
Most of those kids aren't.
That's
We've
exactly
seen
right.
a few I'm sorry.
You keep going. You're exactly right, John. Go ahead.
I've seen in New York, I think it was around Columbia, there was a woman and a young man that was spewing hateful, awful, terrible things. Out of a crowd of how many thousand? You know what I mean? Obviously, there's negative, bad stuff going on that has to be looked at and dealt with. But the great majority are just trying to advocate for peace and not dropping bombs on innocent children. One last thing. Wherever possible, I wish in media, when people are sticking up for Israeli and, people are turning on the Israelis and they're so just pin them down. So you say it's all okay. So what you're saying is it's tactically okay to drop bombs on children. Is that what you're saying? Because they're saying we got to back Israel no matter what. So draw it out. Does that mean you say that it's okay to drop bombs on children? Because I don't think that's okay.
Well, by the way, I have to say, I think there are very few people who need to be challenged like that. The vast majority of people whom I talk to are where you were a minute ago, John, that they support Israel, obviously Israel's right to exist and to defend itself, but they don't support Netanyahu, who is not only attacking democracy there with his judicial decision-making, which was the purpose of the original pre-October 7th protest, but like another guy in this country is purely about self-preservation and continuing in power. So I think most people do get it. John, thank you very much for the call.
And it's also, we've talked about the terrible things that have happened in the settlements in the West Bank and the attacks on Palestinians there, and the cabinet, the Israeli cabinet. There are very right-wing members of that who have talked about Palestinians like they're not human beings.
Bernier, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Good to talk to you, Bernier. What's up?
Good. I don't even know if it's a good afternoon because I'm so pissed, Jim. You have no idea.
About what?
First of all, about this whole situation, I want to say thank you to you and Marjorie for having equanimity and brain in this country because I feel like we are going down the river. This country is really going to a route that's going to make other countries look so good. Yeah. We have to decide, do we want to be a democracy where freedom of speech is there, or do we want to be one of those totalitarian regimes? Hearing people in Congress, people like Tom Cotton or this other, what's his name, all the Republicans, equating any kind of protest with supporting terrorism is ridiculous.
I agree with you completely, Bernier.
Students should be able to protest. I mean, we have a historical example here. We have the Vietnam War. We have people who used to call Nelson Mandela. I remember George Shultz calling him a terrorist. Remember?
Did George Shultz call him a terrorist?
Mandela.
Wow.
Yeah, George Shultz.
I didn't know
that. Find out. George Shultz called Mandela a terrorist. Reagan called Desmond Tutu a terrorist supporter.
Wow.
So what upsets you? Hey, Bernier, what upsets you more? I didn't know the George Shultz is
I
saying
didn't either.
George Shultz calling Mandela a terrorist or Donald Trump saying he is Mandela? Which upsets you? Which upsets you more, Bernier?
I don't waste any brain cell thinking about Donald Trump.
I know you
What
don't.
upsets me more is the fact that I feel that, unfortunately, the Jewish people whom I admire and I support are overreaching by equating any kind of disagreement with the Netanyahu government with anti-Semitism. It's going to be creating anti-Jewish sentiment in the long run because of the overreaching.
Well, you know, it's not only around the world, the overreaching, Bernier, but there's a quote from, I think it was a Jewish student at MIT in one of the stories you read this morning, saying the obvious, that the more Netanyahu does this and then he's gone, the more young Israelis are going to have to live with the unavoidable blowback from Palestinian young people who have seen atrocities perpetrated against their families. So,
but we should also point
Bernier, as
out
always, we're glad to hear from you. Thanks for the call.
Thousands of Israelis, Jewish Israelis, who are protesting outside in Israel and
on college campuses. I don't know if it's thousands, but a lot on college campuses.
And they're also protesting against Netanyahu because they don't like what he's doing either. So,
on a couple of fronts, the judicial stuff, the fact that he's not focusing enough on the hostages, and some of them are deeply concerned about what's happening to innocent Palestinians.
Well, and you see some Jewish kids in these so-called pro-Palestinian protests as well. So it's not like everybody is on the same page here.
We got to take a break.
We got to take a break. We were talking about these protests on college campuses, whether it seems as though Republicans in Washington, D.C. are trying to run these colleges, and whether this whole tragedy is being exploited for political purposes. And how do you protest on college campuses? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In Syria, thousands of people suspected of having ties to ISIS have been locked up in detention centers.
I see the camp.
Yeah, you can see the camp, a lot of checkpoints. They have some security procedures.
Many of the detainees are women and children, and we speak with some of them as their future outside the camps is on hold. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Comcast, offering the Xfinity 10G network, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. Xfinity.com. And Rockland Trust Bank. Their team is dedicated to bringing the vision of your business to life, providing support and advice tailored to your specific goals. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH. A little later in the show, in the 1 o'clock hour, Judge Gertner, Nancy Gertner, will join us yet again to discuss a couple of things. One, the latest on the Trump trial. And if you're wondering, Wednesday is no trial day in Judge Merchan's court. He deals with other matters. She's also going to talk about a sort of under-the-radar case before the Supreme Court on a huge issue, another abortion case being argued today. She'll explain to us what's at stake there.
Here's Cecilia in Haverhill. I'm a high school student. I'd like to think I know my way around civics. I can't understand for the life of me what is wrong about people protesting on college campuses. Assembly is a constitutional right. And then here is a professor. Did I miss the memo? Isn't this exactly what we want our students doing, exploring and questioning and learning? Does it make daily life inconvenient at the university? You bet. As a former divestment protester in the 1980s and current college professor, I never learned as much in college or in graduate school as I did in those sit-ins and teach-ins. And I know, Jim, that you were participating in many college protests, when anti-Vietnam protests when you were at college.
Say what you're going to say, because I told you this in confidence, and I know nothing is in confidence with you. Go ahead, just get it out.
Jim said he went to a lot of protests in hopes of finding a girl.
Okay. Yeah, I said a young woman, actually, is what
Getting
I
a
said.
date.
A date, exactly. By the way, one of our colleagues just made a point during the break to Jamie, which is a very good point. You've heard the expression of like this glass cliff effect. We were talking about, I think it was Audrey who texted and said, notice all the people that are attacking are women. Is the glass cliff effect is when women, particularly, are put in positions of leadership during times of crisis, obviously putting them at increased risk of failure. Those are the times when women are particularly in big demand, when there are slots in shaky leadership places. 877-301-8970 is our phone number.
Judy and Needham, thank you for calling.
Hello there, Judy.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I wanted to make the point about Republicans really going back 2 decades have been against elite colleges. Bush, when he ran, made a point of making negative statements about elite colleges, even though he himself went to Yale. He
went to Yale and Harvard, didn't he?
Right. You wanted to have a beer with him, and it goes all the way through to currently to our former president, Trump, saying he loves the poorly educated. So it's really not a surprise that this is a political moment that they could literally, well, not literally, but they can sink their teeth into and make some, very negative impact on colleges. And it's clear that they that's their agenda.
Judy, that's a great point.
By the way, Judy, I don't know if you're with us
Thank you
when
for the call.
Andy Borowitz's book came out, our famous satirist who lives in New Hampshire. His latest book is Profiles in Ignorance, how America's politicians got dumb and dumber. And part of what he says is those who went to the most elite schools
Ted Cruz,
act
Josh
dumb
Hawley,
because that's in.
What's his name down in Florida? It's like they can't get
DeSantis went to Yale.
Yeah, you can't get any more elite than those schools, but they're virulently anti-elite themselves. I mean, it's really. That
was a great call, Judy, and you're totally right. 877-301-8970. We're talking about two things. One, we're talking about why we can't protect the right to peacefully protest on campuses while at the same time protecting the safety of those who feel threatened, particularly Jewish students in this context. And secondly, as we discussed, again, in a great interview, which is online, with Khalil Gibran Muhammad the other day from the Harvard Kennedy School, about where is the university leader who's going to stand up to these lunatics, the Stefanik's, the Virginia Fox. Can you make the point about Virginia? Virginia Fox is the chair of the House Education and Workforce Committee, who's the one who's chairing all the committees going after these, I have to say, relatively uncourageous, to be euphemistic, university presidents. What did Virginia Fox do a bunch of years ago that made her famous?
Oh, people may remember Matthew Shepard. He was the young gay man that was tied to a post and beaten and left for dead in Colorado because he was gay. And she said that was a hoax. It wasn't true.
She later apologized,
she had
but
to
she said it was a
apologize
hoax.
to his mother, and she's got a lot of weird positions. She's like 80 years old. This has become her cause celeb. Well, I say that because maybe she's of a different generation in terms of her view. Well, I'm just pointing that out for that reason, that she might have a lot of people that are older and not that big on gay stuff, and that's why I'm saying it. So anyway.
Was an 81-year-old president, too. You know that?
That's
pretty
right.
good on LGBTQ issues.
He is. He's come around lots of things, including abortion.
Yes.
He used to be pro-life. He's no longer, I would say, anti-abortion. He is no longer anti-abortion. Lorraine from Worcester, thank you for calling.
Hey, Lorraine, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
Great.
Jim, I agree with you 100% with your firm initial statement.
What did I say?
For a long time, I've been debating that we hear daily how many people are killed in Gaza. And I almost never hear how many people are killed in Israel. I mean, is that a war? And then I keep saying absolutely not.
Is that a what? Is that a what?
Is it actually a war? When you have a war, they report how many casualties on both sides every day. We don't hear that.
Well, in all fairness, Lorraine, you agree with me, but I think you don't, because that's not my position. The fact that Hamas is not killing Jews in Israel now does not take away from the fact that they butchered and captured more than 1,000 Israelis on October 7th, and that shouldn't be forgotten, nor should the 130 hostages, hoping that most of them are still alive. And so even though the Palestinian count, innocent Palestinian count, goes up every day, that should, in my opinion, never be separated from the horror that Israelis suffered on October 7th. But Lorraine, having said that, thank you for your call. Appreciate it.
Another big horror is that Hamas is not making an effort to find out where these hostages are and at least let people know who's alive and who's dead. Apparently, our staff is just reporting now that Hamas has just released a video of Israeli-American hostage Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, I believe is how you pronounce it, the first proof he survived being badly wounded during his capture October 7th.
Is he the one who lost his arm?
I believe so. And his parents have been relentless.
They've been great,
in
especially
trying
the
to get,
mother.
Netanyahu to work harder on the hostages. He says he's been there for almost 200 days, suggesting the video was filmed shortly before Tuesday, the 200th day of the war. So we hope that's legit, and we hope that he is surviving, that many more are surviving. But couldn't they at least tell these poor families that much? Anyway, enough. We're moving on. We are going to talk up next to the first climate czar that we've ever had here in Massachusetts, Melissa Hoffer. As I just said, Massachusetts' first ever climate chief, I should say. Not really czar, but, czar's
whatever,
close enough.
Marjorie, okay.
She's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Behind every headline
across Massachusetts, pedestrians have been killed by trucks and cars at alarming rates.
Is a human story.
I continue to believe that pedestrian safety is one of the most critical issues we face in the city of Boston.
Our approach has been to methodically change our infrastructure to reduce the places where people are at the highest risk.
Recent studies have shown vehicles like SUVs or pickup trucks, the size and the weight, there's a greater chance of traumatic injury.
GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Bernadine Sung Megason with Compass Real Estate, serving buyers and sellers throughout Greater Boston. Learn more at homesbybernadine.com. And Blythewald Mansion Gardens and Arboretum. You can celebrate spring with a display of over 100,000 daffodils and afternoon tea Tuesday through Friday. Located on Narragansett Bay in Bristol, Rhode Island. Blythewald.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Here with us at the Boston Public Library, Massachusetts' first ever, and I think America's first ever climate chief, Melissa Hoffer, who took the good climate fight, I guess, to Fenway the other day. Here's the announcer.
And from the governor's office, she is leading the Office of Climate Innovation and Resilience that looks to harness resources to address the climate crisis in Massachusetts. Here to deliver a ceremonial first pitch, please welcome the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' first ever climate chief, Melissa Hoffer.
Okay, so how'd you do, Melissa Hoffer?
Well, I'll just say it was a tremendous honor to be there, and I'm glad I did not embarrass the Commonwealth.
Did you not? You got it to home plate and over the plate kind of thing?
Yeah.
How much you practice?
Well, they let you, you
get
can
closer?
shorten.
Yeah, but it's terrifying. Isn't it terrifying?
It was pretty terrifying, and I did practice, and I want to give a shout out to my friend Rob and my friend Bron who helped me practice.
Fabulous. Congratulations. That's great.
I would have a million heart attacks, so good for you for being up there and able to do that. So tell people, I said before you were the first climate czar, you're actually the first climate chief. What does that mean? What do you do?
So the governor issued an executive order actually on her first official day serving, and it created this position, the Climate Office of Innovation and Resilience. So what we are tasked with doing is ensuring that all of the secretariats are fully engaged in the work of climate change, because climate change is an issue that touches everything. It touches national security, public safety, public health, transportation. Of course, it's an environmental issue. It touches our state budget. So all of these things have to be centering climate change in a way that we haven't done previously. So you might recall, typically the Environmental Protection Agency or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or here the DPU or DEP, have for many years been the agencies that have been tasked with dealing with environment and climate change. And you've seen an effort at the federal level. When the Biden administration came in, it created the Office of Domestic Climate Policy. Gene McCarthy headed that, another Massachusetts superstar.
Yeah.
And we can really take credit in part for, having Gina be able to serve in that role and start to do at the federal level what I think many states and corporations and other entities are going to start doing now. You probably just saw that the city of Boston now has appointed its first climate chief. And that's just because it's going to be the defining megatrend of our lives and for the folks who come after us. So having somebody who is helping institutions shift in the way that they need to adequately protect our communities and to help really bend the emissions curve is just going to be vital.
That's where the whole government idea
That's exactly
comes from.
right.
Everybody's going to be concerned with climate in their offices.
That's right.
By the way, Gina McCarthy, former head of the EPA, is going to be with us at the UMass next Friday, as is your boss, the governor at UMass Boston. So I know the list is long, and I think you don't like the word goals. I think you like mandates or something like that. I read in a Good Globe story about you. Give us a couple of the things at the top of the list that you're charged with addressing in your tenure here, Secretary.
So the first thing that we've been laser focused on, Jim, is how to fund and finance the necessary investment to get us to our net zero goal. So the reason why I prefer mandate is because the legislature has spoken on this issue a number of times. In 2008, we passed a Global Warming Solutions Act. It was one of the first of a handful of laws like that in the country at the time. It was very forward thinking. And it put in place a requirement for EEA to develop climate plans, clean energy and climate plans, to show how we're going to reach our goals. In 2021, another statute was passed that actually set for us, you must get to net zero by 2050. And what that means is that by 2050, any remaining or residual greenhouse gas emissions that we have will be offset by the ability of our natural and working lands to sequester carbon. So we got to get there. And what we haven't done yet, and Massachusetts is not unique in this regard, we have not yet looked at the total investment that's required to get to those net zero goals.
Meaning you don't even know what the cost is.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so those costs will fall on different economic actors. And so you may have seen the governor directed me to issue recommendations to her, which we issued in October. And our initial focus on those recommendations is let's get an economic analysis done for both what we call mitigation, that's reducing emissions, and for resilience, which is making sure that our infrastructure is able to withstand the impacts of climate change.
So 2050, you just mentioned a minute ago, Secretary, this net zero thing. My recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, is net zero within state operations, the goal is 2030. Is it not?
There are interim targets. So we have 2025 goals, 2030 goals, and 2050 goals.
Am I right about state operations? And let's do another one. I know 1 million AVs on the road by 2030. That is part
900,000,
of... 900,000, yes. No, whatever. Okay, 1 million. How are we doing on those fronts?
So you probably saw from we did our first ever report card, and this is our effort to be very, very transparent with the public about this. So right now, we need to do much more, much faster. And we put that report card out in December. Everybody can see this. But we need to increase the rate of EV adoption. Right now, under the Inflation Reduction Act, you can get a $7,500 tax credit for a new EV. At the state level, you can get a $3,500 rebate. So you can get $11,000 off the price of a new EV today. You saw in the last quarter of 2023 and the first quarter of 2024, EV sales are going through the roof. That's happening across the country, and that is in part because the Biden administration has made over $7 billion investment in EV infrastructure. Some of you might still be concerned about having an EV because you are worried about charging. We call it range anxiety. You're concerned if you're traveling somewhere you won't have enough juice to get where you're going. So by putting the necessary charging infrastructure in place, we're hoping to unlock that. So starting in 2025, we will begin, Massachusetts has, the Department of Transportation has a $60-some million grant from the federal government to start getting those charging ports built. And that means that very, very soon on all of our major highways, Route 2, 95, 495, you won't be able to go more than 50 miles without hitting a high-speed charger. And that's really going to make a world of difference. I think that's what's going to, you will
Can
start
I be
to see
skeptical for a minute? There was a story in the Washington Post the other day that was really disturbing that maybe 2 weeks ago, saying that in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was money for 500,000 chargers around the United States. And so far, 7, and all of us had to do a double take, 7 have been constructed. If you read the article, if one read the article, it's pretty clear it's not the federal government that's the problem, it's states that are the problem. We've been slow off the mark in the state. This whole fight about whether or not we had the legal power to build chargers on the Mass Pike rest stops, and we ultimately decided to do it. Correct me again if I'm wrong. And what did we build, 6 or something? Is that what the number is? I mean, that realistically is not going to cut it at that kind of rate, is it? Or?
We can't use the federal dollars for Mass Pike because it's a state highway. So what I think about when I think about this is really on the scale of like a World War II effort. What we're trying to do right now with our industrial policy, bringing all that clean energy manufacturing home to the United States of America, bringing it here to Massachusetts, that's a big part of what we're trying to do with the LEADS Act, a $1.3 billion investment in climate tech. This is changing the way that we do energy in the United States and the world. So is it going to take a little bit of time for people to start getting that in motion? Yes, it absolutely will. I cannot tell you, like, these are huge dollars. So when we get that money in to DOT, for example, they're immediately out there contracting.
Okay.
It's getting the RFPs. It's getting the people to come in and build the stuff. It's complicated. You got to figure out where all the sites are going to be. You have to make sure with the utility companies, it's also connected to them, because we got to make sure when you plug your vehicle in, we're going to have enough juice there. So that has to do with the utility companies making sure that we have adequate grid modernization so the power is there. So if you just think for a moment about how complex these efforts are, I actually think it's incredibly fast how it's moving. Take EPA, getting out $27 billion right now for decarbonization, which is just a fancy word for getting the fossil fuels out of the heating sector. Okay? EPA has never pushed through that much money before, and they're knocking it out of the park. I have worked with these people.
You better spend it fast.
They are spending it fast, and I hear you on that.
We're talking to Climate Chief Melissa Hoffer.
And when you say spend it fast, because if President Trump wins, he is a climate change denier, and that's one of the things I was going to ask you. He has a lot more power over the federal government and state government, but that's a threat to people that are worried about the climate.
It is a threat to people who are worried about the climate.
What could he do?
Yeah, so what they're planning to do, and you know they have a pretty extensive white paper on this, is claw back all that money under the Inflation Reduction Act, under the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which would kill American jobs, which is bad for the American people, and which places everybody and their families at risk. They also want to dismantle, and I say dismantle completely, the Environmental Protection Agency, which means that we wouldn't have a watchdog in federal government looking out for people's public health every day the way that EPA does right now for everybody. But your question is really important, because what it does is it amplifies the role of states. States and cities have to lead in this moment. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. And for me, that just means when we have leaders like Governor Healy, we really need that support so that states can model what's possible. States can show how to do it.
Well, we need some cheering up here, those of us who are very worried about the climate situation. Melissa Hoffer, the first state climate chief. So give us some good news. What's happening right now in Massachusetts that we can be happy about?
So I will just tell you, I'm thrilled about this news, and you're going to hear more about it next week. But you know, within the first 6 months, we established the country's very first community climate bank that is going to be funding the decarbonization of affordable housing. And why that is very important is because when you think about an asset like affordable housing, sometimes private investors are nervous about investing in those kinds of projects. There's questions of creditworthiness, there's all that. So, but when you bring the state in to work with the private sector, the state can do things like de-risk those investments. We can say, hey, if you come in, private bank, and you invest alongside of us, we can make sure that your investment is protected. We will give you a loan loss reserve. We can help buy down interest rates. So that what we can do, and what we have done, is put whole pipelines of projects together that then can have co-investment with private banking entities and also with this money that we were just referencing that's coming from EPA. So next week, the Climate Bank is going to be announcing its first product, which is super thrilling, and I cannot tell you the details of it, but what it means is that, you know, average people are going to get a lot more help very soon in affordable housing to make the changes at their homes.
You mean like to go from a gas water
right.
heater to an electric water
That's
heater
right.
or a heat pump?
Yes.
Okay.
And it will be made easy. and it will help reduce their energy bills going forward. So it's a huge win-win. These have indoor air quality benefits, so it's healthier for people. It also helps people to reduce their energy bills going forward. And then for all of us, there's a win-win because we bring down greenhouse gas emissions. The building sector is responsible for a very large amount of our emissions in the Commonwealth.
So, Chief Hoffer, plastic bottles. Marjorie has, hold up your bottle, please, does not use plastic
this bottle here?
No,
Yes.
or
Oh,
you don't
this
use
thing.
them
Oh,
anymore.
this thing here, yes.
However, I need your help to save me from myself.
I will buy you one.
Not
I'm buying
quite
you
yet. Well,
one now.
but maybe there's a bigger policy. Your boss, the governor, announced, I don't know, a handful of months ago that within state government there'd be no more plastic bottles. She was on the show a couple days later, and we asked her, do you support the proposal in the legislature to ban bottles statewide? Here's what she said. Look, I support it for my agency, so I obviously support it for others as well, but that's up to the legislature. You're quoted in the Globe saying undecided. What is the, I mean, how can you be for a ban, collectively, you, the governor, how can you be for a ban within state government and not automatically be for a ban statewide? Are you or aren't you?
That's not how I read the governor's comments.
No, but what's your position?
I agree completely with what the governor said.
You support a statewide
What
ban.
I would say is that we look at any legislation that comes across the governor's desk. This is the legislature's decision.
How about the concept?
So what I will tell you, though, is right now, everybody sitting in this room has probably about a credit card's worth of microplastics in your body. Those things cause organ inflammation. The science is getting very clear on the public health impact of it. So not only is it clogging waterways, not only is it poisoning the communities, particularly in the southern part. You know, you think about Cancer Alley where all these refineries are. This is a big environmental justice issue. Fossil fuel companies have seen the writing on the wall. They understand that the market for their product is going away in the not too distant future. So they are beginning to focus their efforts on upstream sales, which for them is plastics. Plastics are made of fossil fuels.
No, I got it. But my question, what I don't understand, I guess where we have a little space between us is, you know, you say I'm where the governor is, that's up to the legislature. I mean, let's pick an example. The governor didn't say I'm going to wait to see what the legislature is going to do on housing. She crafted a $4 billion housing bond bill. It's subject to the details. And I understand, of course, the devil is always in the details. Conceptually, does the administration support a statewide ban on plastic bottles?
Directionally, I think it's completely consistent with our climate policy.
So yes is the answer.
Directionally, I think that it's completely consistent
I don't mean
with
to
our
be a
climate
pain. What does
policy.
directionally mean?
It means that we think that plastic and the manufacture of plastic contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. And our whole goal right now is to move away from fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. So supporting plastic isn't a part of that picture.
We're talking to Melissa Hoffer, who's the climate chief for Massachusetts.
You know, the other thing we've asked the governor about a couple of times, and she said that it's in litigation or something. What did she say about Hanscom Field?
Well, it's before this agency or whatever it is.
But again, I don't know how anybody it seems to me that's pretty clear. Private jets are very, very bad for the environment, all those, you know, whatever they're doing.
You should explain. They're talking about expansion there.
Yes, it's for more private jets up in Hampshire Field. I think it's 17. So that's not a good idea for the climate. Where are you on that?
So I think, you know, the process right now, Massachusetts has the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. It's the analog of the National Environmental Policy Act. And what that statute does, you know, when you think about the national one, it was really to look before you leap. So when there's going to be a certain project that triggers the threshold for MEPA applicability, we want to make sure we understand what the environmental impacts are. It's really important for everybody listening today to understand that MEPA does not red light or green light a project. The thing that MEPA does is get out on the table what the environmental impacts are. It seeks public comment. The public comment period, by the way, is still open. It's open until May 10th, so people who are concerned about this, I've heard from many of you. I really encourage you to get your comments in. It takes public comment, and then it looks potentially at ways to ask the project proponent here, which is Massport, to condition the project to reduce environmental impacts. So the question here, and I cannot comment on this proceeding because it is going through our MEPA process now, but you know, the question here is, what are the environmental impacts? What are the greenhouse gas emissions going to be? So I encourage all of you, there are at least 3 expert reports pending in this docket right now, 1 from Massport, 2 for some entities that are opposing it, that lay out analyses of what the greenhouse gas emissions would be from this project. And as you might guess, they don't agree. So this is going to be an issue that the Commonwealth is going to need to understand very well as we go through this process of trying to figure out what is the impact of the proposed changes at Hanscom.
But just to be clear, while they may not agree on a specific number, I've never heard anybody say that there are not more emissions per passenger riding on a private jet as compared to a commercial jet. The issue is magnitude, right?
Yes, but here, Jim, there is a question of fact, and we can't prejudge this. And that's really important. We look at the facts and we look at the law here, but there is a question about how the planes get to Hanscom now.
I see.
Sometimes empty planes are ferried to Hanscom in order to pick people up.
Got it.
So you may have heard that Massport's position is that the project may reduce emissions.
Wait. Massport is contending that expansion of Hanscom might reduce overall emissions?
That has been Massport's position.
Okay.
You mentioned people can get their comments in. How do people do that?
So you can go to the MEPA website.
And MEPA is?
Massachusetts Environmental Policy Office. It's our MEPA office.
Yep.
And you can submit comments online there.
Okay.
So, Melissa Hoffer, climate chief for the governor, there was a celebration the other day that Massachusetts won the solar competition, $156 million. Can you break that down? $156 million is a lot of money. I don't know what it means for me. What does that victory mean for the average energy consumer in Massachusetts?
Okay, that's a great question. Solar for All was a part of that $27 billion that I was referencing from EPA. So basically, $27 billion, $7 billion of it went for solar that will largely be used for solar on more or less affordable housing.
And our share is the 156, right?
Yeah, and we got the largest award in the Northeast. It's one of the largest in the country. And we think the reason for that is because of our whole of government approach. When we were working on that proposal, we were working with Secretary Augustus' housing agency, with Secretary Tepper's agency, with the Climate Bank itself. So I think the federal government could see the compelling case for, okay, if this money comes here, these guys already have a ground game. They're already working together. The housing people know the environment people. They know the people at the Climate Bank who come in with already having a pipeline of projects to do. We can see exactly how this money is going to get spent, and they can move it quickly because they already have the infrastructure in place. So what it means is, as you're doing retrofits on existing housing to make it use less fossil fuels, now we can boost that work by putting solar panels on. And that's further savings for the people who live in that housing. And it's cleaner and better for public health.
What are you going to tell the Pope? You, the mayor, and your boss, the governor, are going to this Vatican conference on the climate, right?
I would never presume to tell the Pope anything. But what I will tell you, Jim, and this is from the heart, when Laudato Si came out in or around 2016, I read it every morning. I read a chapter of it and underlined and tabbed my copy of it. It was one of the most moving calls to action on climate and justice that I've ever read. So for me, it's a tremendous honor. I know it is for the governor, and this particular conference is focused on how do we govern in a time of climate disruption? Because we have delayed, and not for, that's because in part we had the most successful public deception campaign in the history of the world brought to you by the fossil fuel industry, but because we've lost about 40 years in decarbonization, now we have to have very, very steep emissions cuts while we're also protecting communities from the impacts of climate change. And you all have seen what our neighbors in Leominster, out in the western part of Massachusetts, our farmers there, up in North Andover, we have seen people who are really struggling with the impacts of climate change. So we got to take care now of our communities. At the same time, we're on this enormous, as I mentioned, comparable to the scale of a World War II effort to change very, very quickly the way that we consume energy.
Melissa Hoffer, we're thrilled to have you, and we hope you come back soon. We wish you immense luck in your work. Good luck.
When she does come back, we're going to hear about her small band of Nigerian dwarf dairy goats out in the backyard up there. Thank you very much for being with us, Melissa Hoffer.
Millions of dollars in U.S. aid for Ukraine, delayed by several months as it fights the Russian invasion, is now being released imminently. President Biden has signed the foreign aid bill and spoke a short time ago.
In the next few hours, literally the few hours, we're going to begin sending in equipment to Ukraine for air defense munitions, for artillery, for rocket systems, and
for weapons maintenance and training for Taiwanese troops. Much of the rest of the amount would then fund the Taiwanese Navy and its submarine program. Emily Fang, NPR News, Taipei, Taiwan.
The Supreme Court is considering another abortion case today, drawing dueling protesters, both pro and anti-abortion rights.
Abortion is out there. We want it now.
The Biden administration argues federal law allows hospitals to provide abortions during pregnancy-related health emergencies. Idaho says it must be a life-or-death situation for the mother. Protesters to clear out an encampment, with some classes being held online amid student safety concerns. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Following in the path of the town of Brookline banning tobacco and e-cigarette sales to people born in this century, more than a half dozen Greater Boston communities have passed or are considering the same types of bans. The Globe reports that the move comes just weeks after the Supreme Judicial Court upheld Brookline's bylaw banning tobacco sales to anyone born on or after January 1st, 2000. Boards of Health in Wakefield, Stoneham, and Melrose have already provided or approved various versions of the ban, and public hearings are on the way to Winchester and Malden, and Reading and Medford could be up after that. Some supporters of the ban want it to become a mass movement so that individuals just can't go across town borders in search of tobacco. Don't look now, but another high-profile court case is about to get underway in the Boston area. We're talking about the sexual harassment trial of former City Health Chief Felix Arroyo. The Globe reports that the trial is set to start in a few weeks, will feature none other than former Boston Mayor Marty Walsh and other Boston political and legal figures, including sitting federal Judge Mark Wolf, all as witnesses. A final pretrial hearing was held yesterday where it was announced that the trial would last about 2 weeks, which will start up in about 2 weeks as well. A move to limit camping in Salem has won approval from a city subcommittee that has spent the past month deciding whether to back the ordinance. Salem News reports that the approval of the council's public safety panel means that the full council could vote soon on that measure. It is 55 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I want to remind people, if you're over in the Dorchester area, we are taking the whole show. Boston Public Radio is going to be at UMass Boston on Friday, May 3rd. We're going to be joined by the Governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, and we're also going to be joined by Gina McCarthy, Dorchester woman who used to run the EPA for Barack Obama. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, Marjorie. We're joined now at the BPL by Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her latest book is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. And by the way, I just want to address the audience for a minute. Her parents are in the audience today. So if Juliette, wait a second. If Juliette says anything you don't like, try not to boo or anything that's going to embarrass her in front of the family.
Billy and Bob.
That's right.
My parents.
We're thrilled to have
Dad
them.
has apparently something better to do because he's in line for coffee. I was like, what'd you come here for?
We're thrilled to have them, and we're thrilled to have you. Good to see you, Juliette.
Thank you.
So, Juliette, you teach at Harvard. You're over there on the campus. Harvard has just suspended this pro-Palestinian group over there. There are protests all around the country, MIT here, Emerson, et cetera, Michigan, all over the place. So what do you think about these protests on campus? How do you do them safely?
Yeah.
What are these colleges supposed to do?
Right, and they have graduations coming up. So a couple things. I want to start with the obvious. These are not. There's anti-Semitism that we are seeing. The pro-Palestinian movement is not guided by anti-Semitism. So these broad brushes of condemnation towards the protests are outrageous. The pro-Palestinian movement is no more only about anti-Semitism than the pro-Israel movement is about Islamophobia. So there are elements within both that are shameful and racist, and we have to do everything together to purge them. I want to begin with that because some of the language out there is outrageous. These are legitimate protests about a war that the U.S. is essentially supporting, and we have to give an outlet for it. So I call it, I'm a simple person, so I do help a lot of colleges and universities. The 3 O's, I call it. So first is you got to provide an outlet for these students. It's ridiculous to say we can't have protests or you can't do X. It can't all be about can't, right? It has to be about, these are colleges and universities. These are where these kinds of expressions are. It is where students should feel uncomfortable, right? These ideas that
not unsafe, but uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable is legitimate.
I agree with
and
you.
it is not. And then if you feel unsafe, it is what is the thing that's making you feel unsafe? Is it a viewpoint or is it that you're actually being harassed? The second is off ramps. So what you see is all like the Hill and Twitter and lots of commentators sort of get from DEFCON 5, which is peace, to DEFCON 1, right, which is like war. Like, you've got to give students and these student groups, and we're starting to see this at some of the schools, like an opportunity to make their case, provide them off ramps so that they can't, in other words, they'll begin to understand what the punishment will be. But you've got to de-escalate. Like, it's the colleges and universities' responsibility to de-escalate, and we haven't seen that in some instances. And then the third is, then you have outcomes. Then you assert the consequences for these students. I cannot believe that anyone's surprised that this is happening. I cannot believe that colleges and universities seem to be flat-footed going into graduation. Like, we know now what's going to happen. This is a solvable safety and security problem unless we don't plan it out. And the larger issues about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in both movements, I'm very clear about that, will get addressed over time. But I don't think either movement is animated by hate.
I want to seize on you're saying some of the university leaders are flat-footed. I would argue, as I did at 11 o'clock, the reason they're caught flat-footed is because they're trying to serve 2 masters.
Yeah.
The students, who are they primarily obligated to, and lunatics in Congress.
Yeah.
Who essentially think they're running these schools, and sadly, in some cases, appear to be. I mean, Marjorie started by saying that Harvard had banned this pro-Palestinian group. It's interesting. Harvard didn't ban them.
No.
Right after October 7th, when they came out with what was generally perceived as a pro-Hamas message. They banned them now, after Republican members of Congress are breathing down the necks of Claudine Gay, who's now gone, and other university presidents. So I think the first thing, we discussed this the other day with your colleague Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and we said, name for us the one college president who has stood up to essentially the free speech terrorists in the Republican Party in the House, and he said, I can't name one.
Right.
Isn't that what we need first? Is a courageous...
You mean the free speech except Palestinian
advocates,
well, exactly.
Right?
You can say whatever you want except if you're for Palestinian
But isn't that
rights.
the problem? Is the college presidents are not showing?
And that's why they've
spine.
got to get no. But part of it is they think that they can silence their way. They think that they can remain quiet through this. Get a backbone.
I totally
set
agree.
the conditions of what is acceptable and unacceptable. Do not be surprised, right? I mean, this is we know what is about to happen this month. Students are, whatever your politics are, this is not, this is with, most of this is within acceptable protest behavior, or even if it's not acceptable, it's not unusual. I mean, you had the apartheid protests when I was in college, Vietnam, when there's been protests on colleges and universities. Why are we acting like, oh, this has never happened before? It happens every decade.
Because they're scared of rich donors and Congress. That's the bottom line.
But I will tell you, the get harsh philosophy will backfire. We see it.
I agree with you.
So as I said, I'm making it easy. 3 O's.
We asked Khalil Gibran Muhammad this question the other day, also, as we said, from Harvard. Harvard has got more money than God, practically. Yeah. So you would think if there were any place that could stand up both to these rich donors and to politicians whose
Right.
motives are suspect, it would be Harvard.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is, look. If there is direct anti-Semitism, and I mean violent anti-Semitism, as compared to Jewish students feeling uncomfortable, and that's where I think my universities and other universities have not been clear that the complaint by Jewish students that they feel uncomfortable is not anti-Semitism. And clearly define what it is. We have an anti-Semitism task force. Can they define it for us, right? And then if that definition holds, then we will live by that. But the idea that I don't like seeing Palestinian protesters in my courtyard, right, which I experience all the time at the Kennedy School, right, is like, whatever, right? This is and I don't, and any more than if there's a rally for Trump. What am I going to do? Like it's a university, as long as they follow the rules, and then of what is acceptable behavior. Then you focus on the anti-Semitism, which is real. The problem is that if you sweep anti-Semitism too broadly, it will not be an effective tool to root out the real anti-Semitism. Right. And I have been saying for many months here, it is just being used too broadly.
Well, as we've said before, there are a lot of Jewish kids in these pro-Palestinian protests.
Yeah.
I mean, so...
Totally, including the ones at Columbia.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the idea that you can just think that this is anti-Semitic. So I think part of it is having a rule. So this group that got... banished from Harvard. So it's interesting. I don't know. Pro-Palestinian. I don't know what the background is.
Harvard won't say.
Right. So one thing that is helpful for organizations, whether it's Harvard or mine or whatever, is what are the rules regarding losing two things: losing your status, right? And you can be clear about what those are. You don't have to hide behind, we don't comment on student groups. That's not true. You comment on student groups all the time when you want to. Don't fit. And then the second is, what's their, I talked about off-ramps earlier. Also, what are the conditions for them for the on-ramping? You can't exclude a Palestinian group. I mean, what's going to come in its place? There's going to be another Palestinian groups. What can they, if they violated rules, what can they do to be reabsorbed by the college or university? We are the adults. And I'm not saying that they get excused for bad behavior because they're younger than us, but one would like to believe that an institution as old as Harvard and people as old as us have a little bit more experience than an 18-year-old.
We're talking to
Just
Juliette
a little bit.
Kayyem. Juliette, one last thing about the Harvard situation. For those who feel that, and I can already tell, some people feel being unfair to Harvard. We've been on the air 25 years. We've invited every Harvard president to be on the show. The only time a Harvard president comes on the show is when they're no longer a Harvard president. Larry Summers came on the show after he was president. Who's the president was with us a couple of months ago?
Drew Faust.
Drew Faust-Gilpin, or Gilpin-Faust.
And
she was terrific about her book, about her first 21 years of her life. But if Alan Garber, acting president, we would welcome you anytime that you would like to come and discuss what you're doing over there.
I mean, I don't know, are we being fair, unfair? These are just my opinions as a safety
analyst.
Well,
the reason we don't know.
I mean, my institution, it homes me. I support it. I've been trying to be helpful through this very difficult time for the institution. I don't, unlike others, I don't tweet out from my office trying to undermine everything and bring them on.
Well, let me just tell you, though, you don't have to answer. The trustees were cowards during the Claudia Gay thing. I know you don't have to. They were cowards, and they should pay a price. So this morning, Joe Biden signed and made remarks about the nearly $100 billion in foreign aid, Taiwan, Israel, Ukraine, that was finally passed in the House and last night in the Senate. Here's a little bit of what Biden had to say.
It's a good day for America, it's a good day for Europe, and it's a good day for world peace, for real. This is consequential. I just signed into law the national security package that was passed by the House of Representatives this weekend and by the Senate yesterday. It's going to make America safer, it's going to make the world safer, and it continues America's leadership in the world, and everyone knows it. It gives vital support to America's partners, and so they can defend themselves against threats to their sovereignty.
By the way, and while we can continue, as I'm sure we will, to say, as Marjorie has said relentlessly, why is Joe Biden not putting some limitation on the supplying of weapons to Israel? There is $9 billion, which doesn't address that issue, $9 billion in humanitarian aid for the Palestinians. I want to talk for a second about the political impacts of this, which I don't think is getting enough attention. When Mike Johnson, the speaker, finally, I'm not going to call him Churchill like Hakeem Jeffries did, the Democratic leader, when he finally did the right thing, and the vast majority of Republicans, including Mitch McConnell in the Senate, did the right thing by voting for this aid to help try to protect democracy in Ukraine, the Republicans stood up to Donald Trump. And it is getting so little play. I mean, it was a major moment, was it not?
It's a major loss for him that he's now... So that he's now following. I get agitated when we do this because this was doable in 2020. We had to go through this 4 years of madness, and you're starting to see it now. You're starting to see Republicans turn on Marjorie Taylor Greene publicly. They know, and Biden achieved a major bipartisan victory, and Johnson, I read a Post story, just sort of, the sausage making that went into getting Johnson on board, including, basically invocations of his son, who serves, I think, in the Navy.
Oh, I didn't know this.
So basically, if there's World War III, it's your kid, not ours, kind of thing.
I think he's going to Annapolis.
Right. Yes. So to get. Is a major Biden achievement, a major achievement for America, a major achievement for NATO, and the major defeat for Trump. And then I want to add on something to that. So I'm looking behind her, or the number one story is Trump. The number two story is the abortion stuff.
In front of the Supreme Court today.
In front of when you follow someone with no moral compass, this is what happens, right? Is now the GOP will lose lots of elections over Dobbs, right?
Repeal of Roe.
Repeal of Roe. And I think Biden is playing this so well because, I heard someone say, I don't want to take credit for it, saying that the irony is arguably his greatest achievement, which was the appointment of 3 Supreme Court justices, will be his downfall, right? Because he cannot get ahead of Dobbs, because the crazies are taking Dobbs to the limit, and he's losing some of the Christian fundamentalist vote because he's trying to maneuver his way through it. So it's all good metrics for, I'm not saying for Biden, but for democracy and sanity right now, and for reproductive freedoms, and for NATO, and for Ukraine, and for Israel.
But I worry that it's too little too late for Ukraine. No. You don't think so?
No. Because first of all, it was winter when all this was happening. So just in terms of the operations, it was always going to be a slog for both Ukraine and Russia. There weren't, it's not like Kiev fell, right? I mean, maybe at best it was a little bit of backtracking for Ukraine, but not major. And the arms now are going to come with such force. Russia, remember, is at its floor. We're now filling Ukraine's tank. Russia they don't have bodies, they don't have ammunition, they don't have trade. They're getting stuff from North Korea. When you are getting munitions from North Korea, that you're having troubles.
Can we return to one humanitarian thing for a second? I think people remember several months ago it was found that United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the primary humanitarian provider of humanitarian aid in Gaza, it was found that 13 members, I think 13 was the number, were members of Hamas. They were expelled, but the conventional wisdom from Netanyahu was it wasn't 13. The UNRWA is riddled with Hamas sympathizers, including active Hamas members. There was an investigation by the United Nations, and they concluded that was not true. What Netanyahu was not saying true. My understanding is when all these countries, Western countries, suspended contributions to this critical agency, including the United States, the bulk of them now are restoring funding. The United States is not till 2025 because of legislation Congress passed a while ago. Without the United States support for another year, can this agency survive?
So this survives, especially, honestly, since the NGOs are pulling out because of safety and security concerns, and because our own USAID is basically hamstrung on what they can do. I mean, they're trying to sort of maneuver around these rules, but without going in direct conflict with Israel. I mean, remember that crazy, we're going to build a port. Like, it's just so outrageous.
Wait, that we were going to do that?
Yeah, that we were going to build a port to bypass Israel's.
What's the status of that? Because a lot of people's position was not only would it not be terribly effective, but it would be a target for
I'll
virtually...
confirm this, but I haven't heard anything more about it, so I'm wondering
suggesting it may be gone.
that it was. Yeah, I mean, look, this is horrible to say, but there's a correlation between when Israel starts an onslaught of sort of, you can't trust them, they're Hamas, whatever, and the deprivation of humanitarian needs for the Palestinians. And so Netanyahu creates a narrative about this, and it's not true.
So
right? I mean, he's losing support, so he's going to create narratives about this and that are just simply not true.
And one last thing about which we've discussed, I think, with
it's another
John
way
King
of saying
or some...
Netanyahu's a liar. I don't know why I'm saying not true. He's a liar.
We've heard nothing since I think since Israel went after the Syrian officials. Pardon me, the Iranian officials in the Syrian embassy the Iranian embassy, I'm sorry, in Damascus, and obviously Israel responded, and then Iran responded. We've heard nothing about ceasefire negotiations, about hostage release. No. Is anything going on?
I don't think so. No. I mean, look. I mean, one of it was awaiting this deal, right? So that now we can focus on, okay, Israel, we've delivered. Now you need to deliver, but almost nothing. I mean, the big question is Rafah. If he goes into Rafah, it's indefensible.
Half of the Palestinians are now in Rafah. More than a million of the 2+ million.
One change is that the intelligence chief has resigned. I mean, it's just clear that.
But that was about the failure of October 7th to protect the country,
right? But that Rafah is still on the table, I think, is just the big question mark now. The Hamas will not release the hostages if he goes into Rafah. I mean, why would they?
Well, not to mention the fact that while they haven't, quote, gone into Rafah, Margie and I talked the other day about there are 18 kids killed the other day, even before they have, quote, gone into Rafah.
And the UN agencies are saying, June is going to be there's some triggering thing for mass starvation of like Ethiopia type routes, and we know what the long-term consequences are for these kids who are starving.
Yeah, they don't
so this is
always recover because they're so damaged.
So I agree that the college and university protests are a big deal. I agree that there's anti-Semitism that has to be rooted out, but I do have every once in a while do we ever tire of just looking at our own belly buttons? Like the real deprivation, the real harms are occurring.
Well, let me tell you the last thing before you go. Is my sense, and this is totally from having read Nick Kristof's incredible piece criticizing someone who he's always admired, Joe Biden, about how he's handled the situation in Gaza. He talked about something I mentioned on the air the other day that I never thought about. The demonstrations at the Democratic Convention in Chicago are going to be immense, and it seems to me that with that on the horizon, that's the moment when Joe Biden is probably going to have to decide to tell Netanyahu that there are, as you discuss almost every day, conditions on our
Well, I don't know why he hasn't done it already. I don't get it.
Yeah, he can't get that through the Senate. I will tell you, there will be more crowds in Chicago than there are in New York City for our former president. I'm going to end,
Is that where the Republican convention is? You mean for the trials?
For the trial.
Oh, I think they're in Milwaukee or something.
I'm going to end with this. You want the takeaway after week one?
We're ready.
I have not heard any testimony, and I have not watched any TV because I've been busy this week. There's no crowds.
Oh, yeah.
He was complaining about the crowds.
Yeah.
Well, he was saying that they were being held at bay. They're not being held at bay. Look, if you cannot get your supporters to your courthouse, you've got to be terrified. We discuss the metrics of this election, but I'd rather be Biden than Trump right now.
Well, I think in fairness, though, I think Trump is hoping that several years down the line, his supporters come to his parole hearing. Yeah. So that's another possibility. Juliette Kayyem, you did your parents proud. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Juliette. We've been speaking with Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security with President Barack Obama, Faculty Chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and her latest book with the best title ever, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Juliette, thanks a lot, as always. Okay, after a quick break.
It's a hell of a transition
It
here.
is, but you know, to love life matters, which are always important. Boston Globe Love Letters, the vice columnist Meredith Goldstein is going to join us. She's going to tell us about breaking up, how and when to do it, and what can animals teach us about human beings in love. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's been nearly 2 years since eastern Kentucky was hit with historic rain and flooding. Residents missed appeals deadlines without realizing it.
People will come 3 years down the line and say, hey, I want to appeal FEMA, and they can't.
I'm Juana Summers, exploring the challenges of receiving disaster aid on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady, Marjorie Egan. Marjorie's going to make fun of me because I just had a bite of my sandwich, and so I have to
Textures
stall
always complain
for a
about
couple
it,
of
Jim.
seconds.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hungry. What am I supposed to do?
It's very, well, eat when you're not talking.
I'm sorry. Thank
Too late
you.
now.
I will do that. We are live at the Boston Public Library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Boston Globe advice columnist Meredith Goldstein. And let me just say, she's also the host of Love Letters podcast. While I'm a big fan of Meredith Goldstein, if I have to listen to Marjorie tell me minute by...
That's
it
right.
takes her as long to describe the podcast as the podcast is. Enough already.
This is like me talking about TV shows where I'm like, and then here's what happened.
That's
and then
right.
Here's what
Exactly. Exactly.
Welcome, Meredith Goldstein. It's
Thank
great
you.
to see
Thank
you.
you for having me.
That was not a very polite introduction.
It was not.
No,
Really
it was
really sorry.
perfect. It makes me feel at home.
because the columns are great and the podcasts are great. And this latest one about this young woman that learned so much about human beings in love
Yeah.
from birds and different animals. Tell us about this podcast.
Well, I
This
want
is
to
great.
give an origin story to this podcast episode because 2 years ago I was in Key West for the first time. And I wandered off the beaten path and went into a parrot sanctuary. And the woman there, who was surrounded by parrots and clearly lived with like a lot of parrots, was like, I'm helping this one went through a trauma, this one is learning to play the keyboard. And of course, like there was like parties going on, everybody's like out in Key West, and I'm sitting with sad parrots, like learning, oh, I feel grief, the parrots feel grief. And for a long time, I'd wanted to do a podcast episode about how animals process emotions and what we can learn from them. And more importantly, how they court each other. Because of course, that's what the business I'm in. So it started with the parrots, and then I started calling experts recently, locally, nationally, animal experts in breeding and mate choice. And I call this woman, Meg, we'll call her, and she's in Maine, and I'm like, I'm looking for an expert. Are you an expert in mate choice? And she starts laughing, and she said, yes, but also I'm going through a divorce. So she said, that's always a punchline when I say I am, because I have chosen poorly for myself. And we wound up doing this podcast episode about what she, as she goes through her divorce and starts dating new people, what she has learned from her own research.
Yeah.
About how to court.
Well, tell us.
Well, the first thing she's known for pandas. She's like, I'm a big panda expert, and endangered species, like they try to get them to mate. And so how do you make these animals, like, do you play like sexy music? How do you get them to... So she realized that they were putting a male panda and a female panda in a room, a panda room, and saying, go to it. And they're looking at each other, and the woman is not into it.
Yeah.
What happens
The
is...
woman, as in the panda?
I'm saying the woman.
Call that
I'm
a
saying the
female
woman.
panda.
We should call her the female panda, but in my mind,
Okay, fine.
Lady Panda is not having it, not interested in
Like
it.
she'd go with anybody off the street
She's
corner.
like, no, thank you. I have better things. I have hobbies. I have friends. No, thank you. Then the researcher comes up with an idea. She brings in a second panda. She notices one nearby, and there are two men. And the woman says, okay, well, of the two, I'll take that one. So what she learned is that in this situation, specifically with the pandas, when this female panda had a choice, she did choose. When she didn't have a choice, she didn't choose at all. She was just like, I'm out. I opt out. And there's probably something to be said for the fact that she only had two choices, whereas like for humans on a dating app, we have thousands of choices, and it's too many choices. But she began to use that with other populations of endangered species. Pygmy rabbits are one of them. You know, God forbid we can choose from a couple of mates. We might be excited to mate. So then the lessons kept going. Well, okay, what else can I learn, right? And she talked to me about dishonest signals, that a lot of animals are dishonest about themselves. Well, what does that remind us of?
Tinder.
I am this age, this is my hairline, this is my, right? All the ways we misrepresent ourselves, or even just like politely make ourselves look the best we can, right? And it's not what we always look like or behave like. So she was like, I've also learned to figure out what are the ways to tell if someone is giving you a dishonest signal. She talked about crickets and how crickets amplify their sound to be louder. I guess if you're a cricket and you're a really loud cricket, that's like you're like the hottest guy on the block.
Big
So and I think about like ways that humans attempt to be louder. So I have learned a lot now. But my favorite piece of this podcast is I asked her, what is your favorite animal when it comes to the way they court? And she talked about bowerbirds. And I'm not a bird watcher.
I've never heard of a bowerbird. What is it?
They are blue. They make the male bowerbirds, I guess, make a very blue, beautiful home.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it allows a female bird to come in and enjoy it. And I just thought like this, like, you know, if you Google a bowerbird, that it's very blue and it's very beautiful. And she was talking about how she'd like someone to make her a beautiful home.
That's pretty beautiful.
It brings tears to my eyes.
Now, Meredith, I don't want to contradict what you had to say,
Yeah.
but my understanding, you mentioned the woman, otherwise known as the female panda.
I was, yes.
Rejecting the male panda. My understanding, it was not for the reasons you said. The reasons for the rejection is because the male panda, the man we call the male panda, was not brushing its teeth twice a day. Is there any truth to that, or is that?
I think he might not have been. So
my favorite. This is one of the greats ever. Can you set this up for us?
Yeah. So basically, I have had 2 teeth brushing letters recently. So I don't know what's going on. One was about a kid not brushing, or a single father not making his kid brush his teeth. Then I get a letter from a woman whose partner was not brushing his teeth, and he was like, once a day. He was doing it once a day, and she was like, you kind of need to do this twice a day, and he was like, no, thank you. I will not be doing that. And it was interesting. A lot of people were just like, how can you even want to go to sleep without brushing your teeth?
Yeah.
Well, someone said, it might have been you, if he smells like the Cheesecake Factory takeout you had for dinner, that's a problem.
Right, I mean, depending on what you got. Depending on what you got at the Cheesecake Factory.
So what advice did you give her?
Well, you know, my first thought when I read this letter was like, is something happening here? Is there depression? Is there, you know, this is like a lack of self-care on a pretty big level, right? So, and like to me, this is not, you know, it's not just about brushing teeth. So my big question was, what are other patterns that have changed? Has it always been this way? What does this represent? And I hope this letter writer writes back, because I want to know. Like, is this a marriage ender? Like, what is the thing that's happening here? I couldn't imagine it. And I actually, like, have thought about it a lot recently while brushing my teeth. It's made me brush my teeth, like, really, like, I have flossed so well since this letter. Yeah. But I do wonder about, you know, on a much smaller scale than he won't brush his teeth, like couples where one flosses and the other doesn't, or just like,
or has bad breath.
Yeah, and you know, I am like the worst allergy girl, so I'm constantly bathing, because I'm always like, somebody touched me and they had a dog. I'm allergic to the outside. So I'm always very like, you know, but other people, you know, it's like we all have different things. But
so what do you feel about environmentally conscious couples sharing the floss? Are you in favor of that, or are you
God.
I don't listen. You might ask an environmentally conscious expert, and they might have different things to say.
Yeah.
But I'm like, at what is it, to what end? Right? Is that the thing that's going to do it? I don't know.
By the way, you were so much nicer. I assume that's the real you in your advice. I mean, the guy doesn't brush his teeth.
Jim, I'm nice.
Get out of here. I mean, really.
Yeah.
But it is.
He does. He only
is
doesn't
that?
brush. He doesn't brush them at night.
Which is the
before
worst
bed.
time not to brush them.
The big piece of information that's missing to me is has it always been this way?
Yeah.
Or what, when somebody starts doing a weird thing or stops doing an important thing,
That's a good point.
You're kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, you won't go to the doctor either.
This is actually going out of your way to not take care of yourself.
By the way, before we go to the next column, I want you to know that our leader here, Jamie, and his colleagues put names on our staplers, Boston Public Radio, so someone doesn't take it. Can you read what the name is on this stapler?
Oh,
Meredith
it is.
Vieira.
I am so happy.
You're honored, are you not?
I am so honored.
What does it say, please?
It says Meredith Vieira.
Who is that?
Which is what, not me, but it is what Marjorie likes to call
That's
me.
right.
Which, there is, listen, she'd be honored, I'd be honored.
That's right, exactly.
So it's perfect.
Okay, so Meredith Goldstein,
Yes,
not
yes.
Meredith Vieira. You had another great podcast, which I think is so relevant. You were participating in a group kind of podcast about breaking up. And I thought there was such brilliant information on there about when to break up, how to handle it. Give us a little...
So this was with another show called Embodied, and this is, if I could only write about breakups and only do podcasts about breakups, that's all I would do.
That's what Taylor Swift does. Why wouldn't you?
First of all, yes, it is it's. No one ever runs out to buy a book or listen to something or read a column when they're just very psyched. They do it when they need help, right? And so there's a business in it, but also I think it's something we're not trained to know how to deal with. It's it's a belittled kind of grief where you lose someone, you end a marriage, you end a relationship, and it is grief, and it is a process, and there is guilt, and the person is still around, presumably doing something, and we're not told how to deal with that. So I love that my whole first season of the Love Letters podcast was about breakups, how severe they can be. Sometimes they're not severe at all, and we feel bad that we're just kind of fine, right? Or sometimes they hit us later. But it is the type of letter I am most serious about, because everybody always says, I know this is trivial. I know that other people have illnesses and they have horrible lives, and who am I to say that losing a breakup even after 3 months is something, and it is. So with this, it was interesting because we recorded this. This was a late air. We recorded this a few years ago, and we wanted to recirculate it. So especially during a time where we were so isolated, to talk about how do you go through a breakup, because so many people, imagine having a breakup in early 2020, and then the world shuts down.
That's right, with a woman that moved cross country to be with this guy, and then he dumps her right after she gets there, and she's in another state.
She's in another state. We were all stuck where we were. Or imagine wanting to break up with someone, and then you're like, oh, now we're in lockdown together.
You're in lockdown
I guess we're married.
And what the other thing that I think is difficult now too is social media, because you have your boyfriend or girlfriend's Instagram account or all that kind of stuff, and
it goes beyond that. One of my favorite episodes of the stories that was told on the Love Letters podcast was about somebody whose ex was following her on Venmo. So, if you're not private on Venmo, people can see, Meredith paid somebody $1 for an egg sandwich, whatever. And her ex showed up at her door basically in tears saying, who are you? You've already moved on. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I see that every week you give $5 to this one guy. And she was like, he's in the running club. I barely know that guy. But we have too much information, and we are far too creative as people to not put a story to that.
Speaking of too much information, what was the basis of the question to you from the woman who, I think I got this right, whose ex broke up with him by sending an intimate video of him with his new lover? Is that, did I get that right?
So,
whatever.
Talk about a way to really say it's over.
This is
Here's
terrible.
a video of me and my new partner.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, it was
and that's how the person notified the other person?
I think it was after the notification, but a reiteration of the boundaries, we'll say.
And theoretically, what was the purpose of sending the intimate video
all
with
I
the
can
new
think
partner?
All I can think of is cruelty.
Yeah, that's a horrible
or
person.
this will end conversation about getting back together. And I find it, that's the first time I've ever heard that. that my ex has sent me a video of I kept thinking, did this person sit on their phone accidentally and send the video? Like, who does that? Who does that maliciously,
But that's the end. Do we agree that's sort of the end of
that's
the
kind
deal?
when you get, let's make a rule. If you get a video from your ex that is intimate of them with someone new, you're probably not going to get back together. Nor should you.
It's probably, it's very good advice.
But then there are these things, the one I thought was so difficult because this person is married, they've got kids, 3 kids, one was married for 8 years and 3 kids, and the husband is looking at his ex's video stuff online.
You know more about her work than she knows about
I'm
her
like,
work?
which is this?
This is scary.
So this,
I'm an avid fan, and he tells the wife how he's looking at this woman all the time.
So this, to me, this falls under some weird parasocial relationship kind of thing, right? Like, you can follow someone without them knowing, right? You're just a subscriber. You can see what they're doing. I mean, listen, you can read somebody's column every day. Talk about parasocial relationships. There are so many people in the community, and I've said this, who will talk about Jim and Marjorie, and I'm like, oh, like you're friends with them, and they're like, oh no, we don't know them, but they're with us every day, right? So with this letter writer, I thought, okay, or the man in question here, he's watching his ex's videos, which she's doing this like daily sort of updating thing, and he feels like she's talking to him.
Right.
And he feels like they have a connection, and he has an actual history with this person, and the current partner is saying, wait, I'm right here. This isn't, what you're doing is just watching videos, and it's confusing. And this is another way technology is so confusing because, are you friends with Jim and Marjorie? Do you just hear them every day? Do you know them? Like, this is when you're only watching a video or listening. I mean, I would say all of these listeners do know you.
By the way, do you know what we do? I'm sure, I don't know if we've ever said this on the air, but we should say it now.
What's that, Jim?
If we get an email or a text or something, a message from somebody who's a big fan, who we think has crossed the line a little bit, which occasionally happens, we send them a video of an intimate moment with Jamie. Either of us has had, in general, should I not have said that? And that generally ends it. So I want to go to another one. And
hold on. Before you move on from this,
God, Marjorie.
The thing that I thought was so weird about this is usually you think if the husband is looking at pictures of his ex or something, he'd shut up about it.
No.
This guy goes and tells his wife all about what his ex is doing.
He's made himself believe that he has a relationship with this ex because he's looking at her every day.
Wait, but she wasn't even an ex, I thought. I thought
she's like from.
She was.
No, she didn't even get the ex
I think
status.
she wasn't even. I think she was an almost.
An almost.
She was an almost.
Speaking of almost, can I say something here or what?
She's married with 3 kids with this guy, and
lives
she
elsewhere.
She just decides she's going to stay
I would
with
say
this
he's
guy.
not happy there. Would you say that's a fairly obvious thing?
He's not happy with
Not
that.
happy there. Okay, so we're going to go to another one here, which does not
Jim
involve
shuts
technology.
me off so quickly on
no,
these
because
things.
this was the one that. Have you ever used the expression in your earlier life, trending toward dating? Have you ever said that about anybody?
No, I have not said trending toward dating.
So there's this guy. Let me see if I can be as precise as Marjorie is, and I'm probably going to fail, and I feel horrible about it already. So there are a whole bunch of people, men and women, and maybe other genders too, a whole bunch of people in this little group thing.
Little friend group.
And the guy writes to you and says, I'm trending toward dating, whatever that means.
I've never heard this phrase, but I love it.
I'm so glad. Trending toward dating, one of the women here.
Yep.
And my question to you, Meredith Goldstein, is I had a one-night thing with one of the other members of the group. Am I right so far?
Mm-hmm.
And should I tell the woman I'm trending towards dating that I had this, did I get this right? Had this thing, even though it's not a real relationship, it was a one-night relationship. Should I share that information with, why are you laughing about this?
Because this one is so obvious to me.
Okay, so what is the answer to that
I
question?
want to,
No.
No, and I agree. So I think about it like a workplace.
Have to yell.
Sorry, I feel very passionate about this issue. I knew someone who did this years ago.
You do?
Yes. He had been married for like 30 years or something, and he goes to a Christmas party and has too much to drink, and you know what can happen at Christmas parties, and he does something he shouldn't with another woman, and he goes home and he tells
That's
his
totally
wife.
different.
Are you out
he
of
was
your mind?
married to the person as opposed to this.
But I think
I
of this
know.
as like workplace romances. So like, okay, I think about workplace romances. Somebody comes, they get hired, and they're like, oh, that guy's cute. Well, does everybody who dated that guy at work have to tell them who else he's dated? Or are you allowed to just keep your past a secret? And I do think we're allowed to have privacy. And And yet a lot of commenters also felt like, well, guess what? She's going to find out from somebody else, and it's not going to feel good. And if this is really a bunch of very close friends, maybe you do want to talk about it. I think this is a case by case. My instinct is you're allowed to have secrets among friends, and not everybody has to know everything.
Also, you're out in the woman. If it turns out he tells the one he's trending toward dating.
Trending toward dating.
Which is not terribly fair
I could say, like, I'm trending toward eating. It's like almost lunchtime for me.
I'm always trending toward dating.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm 5 feet from the table. Now I'm 3 feet from the table.
Right, exactly. But I think friend groups, especially, my assumption when I get these like group politics emails is that they're 20s, they're 30s, where everybody is like in a chosen family, tight-knit group, and one change could really dismantle, the happiness level of the pod. Yeah.
Of course, you're in later days of the Boston Globe. Back when I first knew people at the Boston Globe, it was a wild scene over there.
So what
does that mean?
Well,
you used to tell me about people going on the roof of the. Can I say this or not?
That was the roof of the Herald.
People going on the roof of the Herald.
That was only 2 people.
Oh,
but it
Who
is.
Were they? No, seriously, excuse me. Who are they?
I am not telling you.
Okay, go ahead.
But you know what they had to do after 2 people were on the roof of the Herald, which used to be at the intersection of the Mass Pike and 93, a lot of traffic at rush hour, and people were seeing what was going on the roof of the Herald, and so they blocked off the access to the roof of the Herald.
Is that really a true story?
Yes. They put up a chain link fence. Yeah, I'll tell you about that afterwards.
Okay.
I just remember, and this is advice I now give, and I think this applies to every place, work, business place. I was told, don't ever think about what you say to people, because you never know when you're going to find out that person's married to the person you're saying mean things about.
Right.
Or trending toward dating.
Trending toward dating them. Yeah. So I am constantly shocking younger, newer employees when I'm like, oh, like those 2 editors are married, and they're like, what? So.
Before you go, Meredith Goldstein, inspired by your brilliant work on the teeth brushing issue.
Yes.
We at the end of the show, when we're done,
right.
whatever else we're doing, we're gonna engage our listeners on a whole bunch of things.
Are.
One, would it be a deal breaker, as was the question to you? And 2 other questions maybe you can answer based on your experience. Do you the less burdensome one is, do you brush your teeth before you eat breakfast or after you eat breakfast?
That's not a dating thing.
No, it's not. But she's a human being, isn't she?
She
so
is.
she can answer that question.
I do it after because I do it after.
Okay, fine. But here's the more
taste
difficult.
Of your orange juice.
Yeah.
Here's the much more
or
difficult
your pineapple.
one. Do you go to work at the Globe, or is that you work at home? What do you do?
I'm going both.
You go. Okay. How do you feel about walking into the women's room and having somebody brush their teeth in the middle of the day and like spitting it out in the damn
I'm
sink?
like both disgusted and impressed. I'm like, good for you, but also this feels. There's also an intimacy with it where it feels like we're in somebody's house. But I understand the reason to do it, and I wish there was like a one stall. I'm really have a lot of conflicting feelings about it, but I'm like, good for you for like doing the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're trending towards being disgusted.
I'm trending toward being disgusted, but I'm also trending toward acceptance. A little bit of both. And by the way, this is like the bummer thing to say with having listened to the segment before this. Yeah. We are approaching a political season, and within it, and I'm hoping to get many letters about couples that are navigating these questions, especially during Passover. I saw so many people navigating these questions, and certainly with an election. So I'm hoping to have a lot of interesting letters that help people navigate this in their own life.
Wait a minute. Navigate what? The election?
Political differences?
Political differences because it was different. It was different 4 years ago. It was different 8 years ago. And it's different today. And, it was different among friends that were like, should I, what am I doing here? And the ways in which we aligned so perfectly, we don't today. So I think that the more you share that, the more it helps other people figure this out together.
Yeah, I'm sure you know this, but we've told the story. We've had many people call through the years who no longer talk to their father, their parent.
Yep.
There was a woman, I'll just tell the story quickly, when Trump was running the first time, every time she called us, she had called us for years, and there was never a time she called where she didn't mention her fiance. She always worked him into the, and actually a warm and loving way. I was talking to my fiance about it. She called right before the election. She was, I don't know what the topic was. It was not a political topic. And she said something, she's about to hang up, and I said, it's the first time you ever didn't mention your fiance. And what do you think her answer was?
Not my fiance?
A Trump-Clinton divide, and he's no longer my fiance. And she said, it was the love of my life. I just can't do this.
Early in love letters, I got a Copley versus Scott Brown letter, and now that sounds so quaint.
Boy, does it ever.
Right? It's very, so anyway, I welcome that to the column because we're gonna need it.
How do people get to you?
Loveletters@boston.com. I'm Meredith Goldstein, easy to find. But if you go to, bostonglobe.com/love letters. You'll also see
Great.
it. But email love letters.
Yeah, your
Meredith,
columns
it's
are
great to
great.
see
The
you.
podcasts are great.
And
Thanks
thank
so
you,
much,
everybody.
Meredith
And I have
Goldstein.
told many people in the middle of breakups about your breakup podcast. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Boston Globe Love Letters advice columnist and podcast host Meredith Goldstein. Thank you very much, Meredith, for coming in. After a quick break, our animal authority, Sy Montgomery, for the afternoon zoo. We should ask Sy, too, about the mating habits of bowler birds and other things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, Maine's new SHIELD law bucks the anti-transgender trend. New federal funding for Boston's LGBTQ+ senior housing, plus why many now claim Dorchester, Boston's best neighborhood. It's our LGBTQ News Roundtable. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, tonight at 9 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Eversource, committed to helping businesses reach sustainability goals and lower their energy use through energy assessments and custom recommendations. Learn more at eversource.com. And Springpool Arts, presenting Robert Frost, This Verse Business, by playwright A.M. Dolan and starring Broadway and television actor Gordon Clapp, now through April 28th at Calderwood Pavilion. Tickets at bostontheaterscene.com.
I'm Jamie Bologna, executive producer of Boston Public Radio, and this is 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Dregan and Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom by the pride of Hancock, New Hampshire, naturalist and author Sy Montgomery. Her latest book is Secrets of the Octopus. Hey there, Sy.
Hey there, Jim.
Hello, Sy Montgomery. So good to talk to you. So,
Hi, Marjorie.
Well, look who's eating now.
I know.
Well, lo and behold.
I'm sorry. I was really starving. I had to have a bite of my sandwich.
You eat. You go ahead and eat. You need it.
No, it's very rude. It's very rude to people that are listening on the radio, but I couldn't stand it anymore. Anyway, we were just talking to Meredith Goldstein. Meredith Goldstein, who is the Love Letters advice columnist of the Boston Globe, and she had a great column about this researcher that looked into
the podcast.
Right, podcast, you're right. About this researcher that looked into the love lives of animals, how they choose mates and whom they choose to mate with. And she talked about a penguin, a female penguin that rejected the chosen partner for her, that the people in the zoo wanted the mate.
Panda.
Was it panda?
Panda.
I thought it was a penguin. Whoops.
Can we start this segment all over or not? Oh, it's live. I'm sorry.
It was a black and white animal.
Well, the point is
That's exactly right.
that animals will choose mates in very specific ways, and that the male may perform certain feats or have a certain loud voice, or crickets make loud noises and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, the point is I'm trying to get at, what goes on with the dating life of animals? I mean, how discerning are they? And give us some good examples if they are that discerning.
Well, some can be extremely discerning, just like we are. And sometimes, even after a long marriage, things go wrong. I'm thinking of the It couple in this Austrian zoo, Poldi and Bibi, who were happily mated. They were Aldabra tortoises, and they were happily married for 115 years. And
115 years.
One day, she woke up and looked at him and couldn't stand him anymore, and would bite him, and his shell would bleed. And they tried like all kinds of marriage therapy stuff. They even tried like tortoise sex toys, and they tried like romantic dinners of delicious foods together, and she just couldn't stand him. And no one knows why, but I suspect he said that shell makes you look fat. But, animals, they're using the same cues that we are. We like to think that we married this guy or this woman because of their wonderful personality. But part of their personality is that they had a great car, or they were a terrific cook, or you love doing XYZ together. And animals go to great lengths to impress females. Bowerbirds build these gorgeous shelters with many different colors. They particularly love to decorate these bowers, which are great architectural achievements, with blue, which is uncommon in nature. So they spend a lot of time, and each bower is different. It's not, that each one is identical. They're each a singular work of art. And they try to impress the females with these terrific bowers. Other animals impress the females by peeing on their beard. Wouldn't do anything for me, but and still there's other animals. I mean, certain species of octopus, notice I keep talking about octopus, but there's over 300 different species of octopus, and it was thought that they only got together to mate and or eat each other, and sometimes both. But there are species of octopus that stay with their mates together for a very long time. And then there's other ones like the blue ring, who's that beautiful little octopus with the bright blue rings that's super poisonous, super venomous, not poisonous. Poisonous means if you eat it, you die. Venomous means if they bite you, it's no good. Anyway, those guys, weirdly, they'll just hand out their sperm packets to anybody. And as you know, frogs will embrace other male frogs. They'll embrace surprised and distressed salamanders. They'll try to mate with your hand. So one thinks they aren't too discerning. But other animals are extremely careful about who they're going to invest in. And it's always female choice. So
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, we have a
like
lot of
that.
listeners, Marjorie knows this, who are indiscriminate with their sex packet too, their sperm packet, I mean. Knowing the audience as we do, I assume most of our listeners know what tortoise sex toys are. But what exactly, for the few of us who don't, what is a tortoise sex toy, Sy Montgomery?
Well,
Look at her.
I didn't actually see the sex toys that they tried
What
out.
have you heard?
And
What's the word on the street?
But it probably is another tortoise-shaped thing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, sorry I asked. We're talking to Sy Montgomery. Sy, one of the most important pieces I think I've read in all the time we've been lucky enough to have you with us is this piece, Scientists Push New Paradigm of Animal Consciousness, saying even insects may be sentient. So I'm sure this is no news to you, and I'm sure you've believed this forever. Tell us what the research shows and what you think the implications of this research are.
Yeah, this declaration, which came out April 19 from a conference in New York City, builds on the earlier 2022 Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. So I should tell you first about that declaration. And that declared a whole bunch of different neuroscientists and psychologists, brain experts got together and agreed that all birds and mammals and possibly other animals, particularly they named octopuses, possess the neural substrate necessary to generate consciousness. So it didn't say that we can see consciousness under the microscope and there it is, but it said that our understanding of brains tells us that the brains of all birds and mammals and some other animals, including invertebrates such as octopus, have the wiring that should be able to generate consciousness. So this new declaration specifically mentions invertebrates such as insects and further defines consciousness as the ability to experience pain, pleasure, hunger, that sort of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you sit around and think about metacognition or that you have self-awareness enough to recognize yourself, say, in the mirror. But when you think of it, of course animals should have this because it's helpful to be able to tell if you're in pain. then you'll move away from the painful stimulus before it kills you.
Well, unless we're causing the pain, it's part of the...
Okay, I think...
Well, if an eel is eating your foot off, you want to move.
Well, but you don't need to throw a lobster in a pot of boiling water, which I do, is...
a lot of us have the experience of having a fly in the house, and the fly is always on the window because it's trying to figure out how to get out, and it can't get out of the window. And you try to catch it, and let it outside if you can. But I've always wondered, are they frustrated? Are they close to giving up? I mean,
I would think so.
Are you better off hitting them over the head so they're not tortured for the next 3 days, banging against the window, or what?
No, I would just capture them in a cup and let them out.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they do want out. They're clearly trying to get out. It makes sense that they should have some kind of mental experience that urges them to get out of that situation. And same thing with pleasure. Pleasure is there so that you do the things that help you survive, like eat your delicious lunch, which you've been desperately trying to do, but instead you're working for us, Marjorie. But, and same thing with sex. I mean, why does sex feel good? Well, otherwise we wouldn't bother because it's so messy and tedious otherwise. But, we need to have these... This kind of consciousness to drive behaviors that help us survive, and that's the same for lots of other animals. In the past, I think we've made the big mistake of dismissing other animals' conscious abilities by saying their brain's too little.
Exactly.
But look at bees. Bees, little tiny guys. They don't have that many neurons. We have 86 billion neurons in our brain, and in their little brain, they have about 1 million. But they are phenomenally complex and dense neurons, more than our own. So we make a mistake just looking at numbers and size. An octopus's brain, for example, is a ring around its throat, but 3/5 of its neurons aren't even in its brain. So, when we look at the brains of animals and say, that can't be doing anything, think again. And also think of miniaturization. Remember how big computers used to be, like as big as your office, and now they fit in your pocket.
Right.
So anything can be miniaturized.
Sy Montgomery, before we leave this topic, I don't want to belabor it, but I was so stunned by this piece about self-awareness. You mentioned looking at yourself in a mirror. There's some kind of fish, you'll tell me what it is, that they put a mirror in the fish's tank or in the fish's environment, and the fish at first think that it's another fish, so they run away. So that is sort of, I guess, reflex. But then after a while, the fish, I don't know how, figures out it's not another fish, it's them. And the way they know this, and please amend what I say if I'm leaving gaps in this, is the fish starts performing for the mirror so it can see itself. For example, swimming upside down, so it can, that is just, it's staggering.
Yeah, they're testing it. They've got a hypothesis, and they're testing. Do you think that might be me? Because I'm going upside down. Oh, and the thing's going upside down. It must be a reflection. And that's kind of brilliant when you think of it.
It is brilliant.
But animals so are brilliant. We just have spent so little time observing them in under conditions in which they display their natural behaviors. We didn't know until just the 2000s, for instance, that bumblebees like to play with toys.
Yeah.
I
Wooden
love
balls.
that, little darling bumblebees.
Yeah.
And, here's this animal. Every child has watched bumblebees for hours, and yet they're still mysterious and complex to us. But every child, I think, if you asked a kid, does this bumblebee have thoughts and feelings? Can it feel pain? Can it feel fear? Can it feel happiness and pleasure? I bet you just intuitively that most children would know that's the case.
We're talking to Sy Montgomery. Is it true that dogs won't look at themselves in the mirror?
I've never seen Thurber look at himself or other dogs in the mirror.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I've held up many dogs to the mirror, and they don't look at themselves.
We've heard Thurber sing.
They look at me. They don't look at
Well,
themselves.
you know who else won't look in the mirror?
Who?
Gorillas. Gorillas, who are so closely related to us, they 98% of our genetic material. And there's a real good reason they won't look in the mirror. Because to stare directly into someone's face is a big threat. So if they look in the mirror, what do they see? They see someone staring into their face.
Yeah.
Which to them is a threat, and they have no argument with that gorilla, so they avert their eyes. So does that say that they're real stupid or they don't have any consciousness? Of course not. And when you ask an animal to show you its ability, you have to pick something that it would use in nature, and you have to be aware of, their own like social and cultural contexts to ask them to design the experiments that will reveal this. But how exciting to be alive right now and getting to create these kinds of experiments to reveal the complexity of all these animals that are right at hand, right around us.
Turn to Sy Montgomery.
Okay, let us move on to another great story about these camels in Kenya that are replacing the cows because of climate problems, drought, and stuff like that. This is a great story.
Oh, I love camels. Don't you love camels?
I didn't know much about them until I read this story. Go for 2 weeks without water.
That's incredible.
And they don't release much methane gas, which is a climate thing. And the cows are all dying, apparently, from drought in Kenya, which I didn't realize either.
Well, I did realize that because there's a saying in Africa, which actually is in that story, and I've heard it, that in drought, the cow is the first to die, and the camel is the last to die.
Yeah.
These guys are so tough. And also, their feet don't mess up the soil that like cows' feet do, cows' hooves do. They live so lightly on the earth, and yet they are these magnificent, they're huge animals. I remember waking up my first night in Mongolia. I got out of my tent because my brain thought it was a completely other time, and I went outside and I looked in the distance. I saw this enormous, lumpy horse. And I thought, my God, that is the strangest horse I've ever seen. And it was a camel. It was just like this, somebody's camel was walking by. But when you're not prepared to see a camel, you almost can't believe that there's something like that out there with those big humps and the split lip and the funny feet and
skinny legs too.
Oh, I know, super spindly leg. But they're very kind animals. People think, have you ever seen when they kneel and then they stand up, they make this grumbling sound that sounds like they're swearing at you? No. And many people think that they're grouchy because of this, but they're not rousing at you. It's just hard for them to do it, and they're just, ugh. But they're doing this nice thing for you that's difficult. And
by the way, it's hard for me too. When I get up, Marjorie's, I make a very similar sound.
He does,
actually.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Sy. Go
Jim.
ahead.
Do you spit at your enemies?
Some of them I actually do. It's funny you should say that. But
And you can get milk from cows. Who knew you could
I didn't know milk, but that's
cows.
so do they other than getting milk from camels, which I did not know they could do until I read by the way, the Washington Post piece is not only beautifully written, it's got beautiful video
oh my God, it's
of
great.
the camels being herded
Marching.
into different communities. I think herding is
I love that.
Yeah, but do people eat camel too? I mean, how do they replace the cow in the culture?
You can, but it's not very smart. That's one reason why in India Hindus will not eat beef. They think it's a perfectly dreadful waste of a cow, because it can give you so much more protein by keeping the animal alive and drinking its milk. And for a lot of, like the Maasai, for example, they're a cattle herding culture. And what they do with their cows, they don't kill them and eat the steak. They will sometimes drink their blood, but mostly they drink their milk.
Hey, before you go, we generally talk about your work. I'm curious because I know you're a big reader. Marjorie and I have this guy on Friday who's written a book called I Will Tell No War Stories, What Our Fathers Left Unsaid About World War II. It's a New Hampshire guy. Have you read the book?
Oh, I've slept with that guy.
That's right.
In fact, I'm going to do so tonight.
I bet you are. By the way, Howard Mansfield, who is the guy she sleeps with, has written a terrific book, and Howard, so it's sort of like a family affair this week. Howard's going to join us on Friday to talk about this great piece book he wrote, I Will Tell No War Stories. Please tell Howard we're loving it, and we're really anxious to have him here on Friday. Thanks, Sy. It's great
can't wait to talk to you.
Nor
both.
can we. It's great to see you, Sy Montgomery. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
As always.
Eat, Marjorie. Eat your food.
Thank you. I'm going to sneak some more in just a second here. We've been speaking with naturalist and author Sy Montgomery. Love to talk to Sy. Our latest book is Secrets of the Octopus. Thank you so much, Sy. After a quick break, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner is here for another edition of On the Docket. We're going to talk with the judge about Trump's trial and the United States Supreme Court's latest abortion case. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's been nearly 2 years since eastern Kentucky was hit with historic rain and flooding. Residents missed appeals deadlines without realizing it.
People will come 3 years down the line and say, hey, I want to appeal FEMA, and they can't.
I'm Juana Summers, exploring the challenges of receiving disaster aid on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And Comcast, offering the Xfinity 10G network, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. Xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library on Friday. Next Friday, we're not at the library. We'll be broadcasting live from UMass Boston. Among the people joining us will be the governor for an hour of Ask the Governor, former EPA administrator, and Dorchester native Gina McCarthy, and a whole host of others. We're joined now, though, at the library for another edition of On the Docket by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's great to see you.
Thank you very much, Judge Gertner, for being here. So people may know the Supreme Court is hearing arguments today about Idaho's this near total abortion ban. We have a little sound from the arguments today, the oral arguments. You'll hear Justice Sonia Sotomayor ask about Idaho's strict abortion law. Would it be implemented in a case where doctors in Florida refused to treat a woman because they couldn't say she would die? The next day, she did get an abortion since she was bleeding to death. Here's the sound.
And Your Honor, my point is...
If your doctor says, I can't with a medical certainty say she's going to die, but I do know she's going to bleed to death if we don't have an abortion, but she's not bleeding yet, so I'm not sure.
The doctor doesn't need to have medical certainty. The
Counsel, answer yes or no. He cannot say that there's likely death. He can say there is likely to be a very serious medical condition, like a hysterectomy. Let me go to another one.
So we didn't get an answer there from the Deputy Solicitor General. Tell us about this case.
Well, it's the collision of two statutes. So one is the federal statute that requires hospitals to give emergency care as a condition of getting federal funds. And the other is an abortion ban that says that you can't have an abortion, that there's sort of almost a virtual total ban on abortion. And the two collide in a situation where a woman, as the hypothetical, where a woman has, where essentially abortion is the medical option in order to save her life or save her, on death's door. And the question is, how far down the line to death does a woman have to go before an abortion is appropriate? It points out, it points out how ridiculous and troubling this has become. The irony of Roe v. Wade is that the Roe v. Wade was making it a medical decision. It was looking at abortion not as the right of the woman to do whatever she wanted with her body, but as a medical decision. And now we're so far down the line that we are criticizing, that we're stopping doctors from making medical decisions at the 11th hour because they could involve an abortion. It's extraordinary. Just extraordinary.
And we've had this happen, too, when women are going into septic shock,
right?
Waiting to get an abortion, which can kill you.
Well, it's also about risk, right? I mean, there's a certain point down the line where the risk of death is very substantial, and why would one ever want to take that kind of a risk? And essentially, the anti-abortion laws are saying, take that risk with the woman's life. Who cares? And that's outrageous.
You know, I read a summary of the brief from a whole bunch of, I don't know, friends of the court or people challenging the Idaho law, and they gave a ton of examples of the trickle-down impact of a decision saying the Idaho law takes precedence over the federal law. And one of the examples they gave is, let's assume a state passes a law barring the use of naloxone for opioid overdoses because they believe that using it encourages addiction. In that situation, a doctor would be in the same sort of conundrum about providing this naloxone that could save a life. So the implications of this are so huge. But on the flip side, we know what the conservative majority is like. So what happens here?
Well, this, at least the oral argument suggests that they're having trouble, which is hopeful. That they're having trouble.
Meaning there's not unanimity among the six conservatives.
There's not unanimity. But again, you have to, the notion of picking potential life, in my view, over actual life is extraordinarily troubling. And the further you get down the line and closer to the woman's death, the closer you're getting to to a real impact on a real human being, on a sentient human being. And the notion that we are even making these distinctions is just extraordinary. But this is a case, in other words, it's not an abstraction. Part of the issue with life or health exceptions to abortion was that the anti-choice movement was saying health could mean anything. Now we're talking life. And this shouldn't be a difficult decision. This should be an easy decision, but who knows?
You know, the one that killed me was the case in the 20-week case in Texas. And now women that are pregnant do have these very elaborate tests, often at 20 weeks along, that are very detailed, and you can see the organs and all this kind of stuff. And she found out that she had a very serious, this fetus was in very, very bad shape, probably would not survive for very long. She was concerned about her future fertility. She wanted to have a third child. This was going to be the third child. And I thought, so she's fearing that she may be rendered infertile or unable to have any more children because of this lateness of this abortion and any infections. And that was sort of cavalierly, well, it's the way it goes kind of thing. I couldn't believe that.
Well, I think, and that was dealing with potential life.
Right.
If you cared about life, you would make a very different decision. The IVF decision is the same way. The IVF decision is about people trying to get pregnant. But we've gone so far down the line here that even that is problematic. As a judge, I think I've talked about this before. I had a case of a woman who was a military person, wanted to get pregnant, was married, but found out that the baby had no brain. There was simply no way that this fetus could survive under any set of circumstances. Her priest even recommended that she have an abortion. She has an abortion. The issue was whether the government would repay her $5,000 for the abortion. Came before me. I ruled that, in fact, the government should pay her the $5,000, and I was reversed. This was before Dobbs. Because there was a statute that says you cannot pay for an abortion. And
federal money?
Federal money, that's right. So, we have gone so far down the line even then. That's sort of the interesting thing about this discussion. It's not that Roe v. Wade was was enforced without limits. From the moment it was decided until Dobbs, the Supreme Court has been cutting away the right to choose. And so the notion that one had to go even further is just extraordinary.
We're talking to Nancy Gertner, former judge, our favorite, a bringer of good tidings, I guess you could
I'd
say.
rather talk about brushing your teeth.
You would? We're going to do that. Stick around. Call the show a little later if you can. So we talked to you on Monday after I think Monday morning was the gag order hearing. Was that right? Or was that Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Oh, so we haven't talked to you since. We talked to you when the testimonies started with
statements.
David Pecker in the open. Oh, so we haven't talked. Gag order. So the prosecutors say that we have at least 10 examples of where Trump or his campaign have violated the gag order. And I would have to say, even Steve Bannon would have a hard time saying this is not violating the gag order. The judge took on Todd Blanche, Trump's lawyer, when Trump's lawyer said all he was doing was responding to social media criticism. And Judge Merchant, bless his heart, an expression I never used, by the way, bless his heart, says to him, give me an example of social media that he was responding to. Nothing. Give me an example. I'm asking you again. And there were no examples. And what did he say? You're testing the patience of the...
You're losing your credibility.
You're losing your credibility in the court. So $1,000, a potential violation, is all that's being asked. Oh, you're sighing already before the question. Being asked for by the prosecutors, which I do not understand. If I'm Donald Trump, I'd be willing to pay $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 a violation. So... What do you think? The judge hasn't ruled yet, by the way, taken under advisement. What do you think he's going to do, and what should he do?
Well, I understand that the New York law, and I don't know whether this is true, actually limits the amount of damage. That's what I heard,
well,
and I don't know whether
I
don't know whether that's true, but that's one of the things that I heard. But certainly, he can be. I mean, the judge could do, and I'm actually proposing, Judge, that this is what you do. That you say, okay, the next time it's 1,000, the next time it's another 1,000, the third time you're going to spend the entire day in the detention facilities in the basement of the courthouse. You do it again, you'll spend the day in Rikers. You know, I mean, I think at this point he's really sort of thumbing his nose at the court. I think he's forcing his hand, which is really extraordinary. I mean, I think he's forcing his hand. And, you know, and we've talked about this before, the other side of the coin. It may well be that Trump would like nothing better than to be let off in shackles.
Well, so what? Yeah. I mean, even if that's the case.
Enough already.
Enough already. Exactly.
Right.
I mean, enough already is the bottom line.
You know, I was very interested in the judge saying that the lawyer, Todd Blanche, was risking losing credibility, because it seems to me that's a problem for a lawyer in the judge's eyes, and maybe in the jury's eyes as well.
Well, there's no jury.
The jury wouldn't hear any of that.
But if this kind of thing, but if this kind of thing goes on, like where you could see that the judge was reprimanding the lawyer in front of the jury or correcting the lawyer.
Should it happen in front of the jury, that would be a different issue, and that actually would be very troubling and could be a basis for an appeal. Because if you're going to reprimand the lawyer, you take him at sidebar, you go into your chambers, you don't do it in front of the jury. Now, to some degree, the judge's attitude to this lawyer could bleed over into the way he deals with him. There's no question about it. But if it's overt, that actually could be a basis to overturn a conviction in this case. So you really can't go there. But I think that what he was saying essentially, Judge, is I can't control this guy, is what he was saying. He was trying to justify what he's doing, but he fundamentally can't control this guy.
You know, speaking of the judge, I wasn't even thinking of this. You were on Anderson Cooper. We watch Anderson Cooper. And there was somebody the other night.
Me and Anderson are like this.
He really had a really interesting observation. I think it was Jeffrey Toobin, but it was Ellie Hunt, one of their legal experts, was talking about how Trump, or was it Maggie Haberman, whoever the hell it was, Trump is behaving much better in the courtroom, even though he's misbehaving in the hall. And the argument goes, the reason he's behaving in the courtroom is he realized what damage his grunts and whatever else may have done to his case. Was it the E.G. Carroll case? Okay. So, and the point...
And that the jury develops an affinity for the judge, who welcomes them in the morning, who tells them they can go to the dentist if they need to, and there's a relationship between the judge and the jury.
So that's what I was going to ask. What's your as having done this?
I mean, yes, that's
jury-judge relations.
There's certainly, I mean, because I had been a trial lawyer, I love dealing with the jury. I love talking to the jurors, and I love
as a judge.
I love doing that. I love understanding who they were and all of this kind. I loved it. And it's true that they look upon the judge to control their lives, right? I mean, they're the ones. The judge in this case broke early on on Monday for Passover. I mean, so this is the judge who controls
and
their
a dental
lives.
appointment on Tuesday, I think, if I remember correctly.
So, you know, and you do develop a relationship, and there's no question that you have more credibility to some degree. So maybe he's doing that, but it also shows that Trump can control himself, i.e., he's controlling himself in the courtroom. You know, so
okay,
that matters.
Let's go back to your life as a top-notch criminal defense attorney. If you had a big-time client who, a Trumpian character, whether, you know, serious crimes, whatever, charged against, would you not always tell that defendant to make sure that your family is sitting right behind you?
Without a doubt.
In the courtroom? Have you ever seen a situation like this where the defendant in a the highest profile case is there totally by himself?
Well, not only that, I don't know whether he's going to do this, but the arguable defense here is I was doing it to protect my family. And where the hell is his
That is a very
family?
good point.
You know, I mean, I used to, yes, I would encourage people to bring their family. I loved babies, right? So if there were crying, I'm convinced at the Charles Street jail that there was probably something on a bathroom door that says, if you want a lighter sentence with Gertner, bring your baby. You know, it's true.
Yeah.
But it is pretty significant that he is standing there, walks in by himself, sits there by himself, surrounded by his lawyers and nobody else. What did you think?
And the other thing is that, I mean, I don't want to say this happily, a trial is incredibly grueling. And sitting there from 9 until 5 is incredibly grueling for anyone, and surely for him. And the reporters are saying that, you know, he's looking crushed by the end of the day.
When he's not asleep.
When he's not asleep, right.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but you know, you mentioned the judge's relationship. I mean, talk about that a little bit more, because I, you know, covered trials a lot when I was a reporter, and the judge would say, okay, it's 11 o'clock, let's have a little break now. And you had the sense that everything was kind of organized, and we're not going to rush through anything. We've all got time, and let's have lunch and all that. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's what you know. You lose control when you're a juror, because you are now you're required to be there from the beginning to the end through your deliberations, and so to some degree, the judge is the figure that enables you to live and gives you, you know, that gives you a license to you know, to take a break, to go and see your daughter's graduation or something like that, and it certainly does develop a relationship. I have a packet of letters that I would get from jurors. You know, thanking me for the service. Actually, that's one of the things that gave me great confidence in the jury system.
Me too.
You know, because you get someone who would, in the middle of a trial, say, I have to talk to the judge, and say, I was on my way to court today, and I accidentally saw the headline in the Globe. I just want to let you know. And that happened so enough times that you knew that even though everyone scoffs at, you know, are they reading anything, scoffs at the rules limiting what they can read and thinks, oh, nobody pays attention to this. I scoffed like that when I started practicing. But the fact of the matter is, most jurors, in my experience, feel something different about the rules of the courtroom than the rules outside. You're impressed with the very difference going on. Now, it's harder with social media. It's much harder, right? You open up your phone and you get breaking news.
Yeah.
You open up your computer and the banner headline. I mean, it's much harder because you can't. We used to, if you remember the olden days, you told the husband to cut out the article, right? And you can't do anything like that now. Yeah.
So, Judge Gertner, while we have you, you want to give us your sense of, we've lived through 2 days of the prosecution putting on their first witness. People know who he is. David Pecker used to run National Enquirer. Obviously, again, as I said, the prosecution's first witness, including describing an incredible meeting in Trump Tower with Michael Cohen and Trump and Pecker himself about a whole variety of things that Pecker would do to help Donald Trump and hurt his competitors. What was your takeaway from the first couple of days?
Well, I mean, I think that it's hard to do it without being able to see it, right? But it felt like a very compelling case up to a point, and I'll tell you what the point is. I mean, it felt like a very compelling case that clearly this was done not for the purpose of protecting Melania, but this was done for the purpose of protecting his reputation, that he paid off.
Ahead of an election. It was only a couple of weeks away.
Right. Well, but it began in 2015, but long before the election, and it was, you know, Pecker was going to deep six any bad stories, the story of the doorman, which turned out to be false, the story of Karen McDougal.
Doorman saying that he had an illegitimate kid.
Right,
Trump,
and then Karen McDougal, who's a Playboy bunny. Pecker didn't want to pay money to Stormy Daniels because he didn't want to pay money for a porn star. I don't exactly understand the morality of one and not the other. And so Cohen stepped up to the plate. It's clear that that's for the purposes of dealing with the election. The problem is the repayment, and that's the issue here, which is that this case hinges on a technical issue, which is troubling. And the technical issue is whether the repayment of Cohen, which was a repayment for the $130,000 and was described as legal fees, was essentially the election, was falsifying documents for the purposes of the cover-up, the election interference cover-up. I thought that the opening of the defense, from what I heard, was very interesting. This is about 34 pieces of paper. You know, the notion that Cohen was reimbursed $430,000 for a $130,000 payout. And I mean, I think we're going to see in the coming days, Weisselberg is the CFO, is going to figure prominently. I don't know whether he'll testify, but certainly his records will figure prominently. And one of the counts is a conspiracy count. So they're going to try to link Cohen, Pecker, Weisselberg in a conspiracy with Trump. Trump clearly knew at the beginning here what was going on, and the payoff to Stormy Daniels followed on the heels of the Access Hollywood tape. So it was very important to him. But, you know, there's a technical defense here.
But I just want to say, when I got the dates a little screwed up a minute ago, while their original meeting about how Pecker would help was in 2015, the payoff to Daniels was after the Access Hollywood,
election.
And the deal very close to the election,
right.
which buttresses their argument theoretically that the end game was election interference to affect the outcome of the election.
Right, but the means by which that was affected had to be through these false invoices. Right. And you know, I mean, I think they'll tie it together. That's what we understand they'll do, but. You know, that is a technical defense. You know, how the hell could Trump have known in this multi-million-dollar business who was doing what and how they were repaying it? And so to some degree, the conspiracy accusation, which links him to these others, would be very important.
Okay, so before you go, when you were a judge and you'd be in the federal courthouse, and you'd go, let's say, at the lunch break into the women's room, and one of your fellow judges
was brushing
their teeth and spitting in the... How'd you feel about that, and what'd you do?
Well, at that point, I was reminded of what tortoises do when they brush their teeth. No, I want to complain to the management here that I get the serious subjects, and you, the others, get things that
I'm helping you out right here.
There you go.
You're avoiding the question?
I am.
Thank you.
Well, the tortoises, that we were discussing tortoise sex toys earlier in the program.
Who isn't?
And now we're going to be discussing brushing teeth and leaving little pieces of toothpaste on the porcelain bowl.
In conclusion, I draw the fact that Judge Gertner, who never avoids a question, avoiding is that means all the judges were spitting in the damn sink at the federal courthouse.
Yeah, we had our own bathrooms.
Your own bathrooms.
You did, excuse me. Sorry.
La-di-da.
La-di-da.
Judge Gertner, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for your time, as always. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Judge Gertner. We've been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Thank you again, Judge Gertner. Okay, after a quick break, we are going to open the lines and text lines and go back to something we talked about both with Meredith Goldstein and Judge Gertner, brushing your teeth. What are your deal breakers? How often do you do it? Should it happen before or after breakfast? And the guy in Meredith's column that refused to brush his teeth before bed at night. Should this be the end of the marriage, or can you somehow survive if your spouse has Cheesecake Factory breath when you climb into bed at night? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Object Lessons. We look at the secret life of everyday things by putting a fine point on the pencil. In her latest book, author Carol Beggy looks at how the pencil has survived it all, never to be erased from history or outdone by the pen, the typewriter, liquid paper, the computer, or even our texting thumbs. It's all here on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you and Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. You can welcome spring with New England seafood dishes, including double clam chowder, crab cakes, lobster, and fish delivered to your doorstep. Online ordering at rogersfishco.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. With you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At about 12:30, I think it was today, we spoke with advice columnist Meredith Goldstein about the anonymous husband who was, let's say, inconsistent when it came to his dental hygiene. While our staff was getting today's show off the ground, the column set off a debate about the unspoken rules of teeth brushing and which dental offenses actually cross the line into serious problematic behavior in relationships, a la the anonymous husband in Meredith's column. So the rest of the show is going to be about all things toothbrushing. There are a lot of points here. First on the agenda, skipping out on brushing your teeth. Listen to this study. By the way, the number is 877-301-8970 to call or text. A study this year from a group backed by Listerine, well, maybe that makes it suspect, I don't know, found the average American, quote, forgets to brush a whopping, do you know how many times a week? Did you read this?
5 times.
5 times a week. Can that be possible? And how many times is a person allowed to forget before you need to have a serious conversation with them? The second question, I can't remember who came up with this, maybe Nicole. The whole issue is, do you brush your teeth before or after you eat breakfast? The orange juice question is really the question there. And the most important question to me is the one that Judge Gertner vociferously refused to respond to is, when you go in the bathroom at work, assuming you actually show up at work, and someone's brushing their teeth and spitting into the sink, is there really anything more disgusting? And the answer is no. The number is 877-301-8970. Where are you on all these issues?
Well, I thought Meredith Goldstein had a very good answer.
What'd she say?
On the one hand, she's kind of grossed out by it. On the other hand, she admires the person for having such rigorous dental hygiene. She thinks that isn't it wonderful that they brush their teeth after lunch at work. But I kind of think it is a public...
Give it a rest.
I mean, if you have 3 sinks and the person next to you is brushing their teeth. But then, you go to college and you go live in some communal way and you have 5 sinks and everybody's washing their face and shaving and brushing their teeth all in the same sink. So there you go. 877-301-8970 is the number. By the way, beyond how disgusting that lunchtime thing is, do you know that if you brush your teeth too often, you can brush the enamel off your damn teeth? Do you know that? I do know that.
How do you know that?
Because I just got a new Oral-B electric toothbrush.
You did?
With that makes a little sound if you're brushing too vigorously.
It does?
Yes.
What does it say to you?
It doesn't say anything. It just makes a sound, and you know that you've gone
too far.
Too far. You've approached the threshold. A lot of people are not. Here's somebody who brushes their teeth first thing in the morning, and they brush their teeth again after they have their coffee and go to work.
That's ridiculous.
That's twice in the morning. Lance in Southborough wants to know: do you brush your teeth before or after sex? Maybe you could answer that one, Jim.
Fine. Okay. 877-301-8970 is the number. And by the way, anything relating to toothbrushing, I think, is fair game in this particular
the
segment.
thing with the guy in the Meredith Goldstein column is if the guy's breath is bad, you don't want to be getting into bed.
Whose breath is not bad if at the end of the day you don't brush your teeth?
Well, I don't know. Maybe some people don't get bad breath. I don't know. But that was the issue that the column didn't really address, was if the guy has bad breath, he's supposed to snuggle up and kiss somebody whose breath is bad. That's very difficult. Then you never really know, is my breath bad if you haven't brushed your teeth enough?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, it is a question. And a lot of people think it's ridiculous that you forget to brush your teeth. I can see where you forget to brush your teeth if you're
if you're drunk or something. You get home and you're drunk.
If you're a college kid and you've been up carrying on to the wee hours.
Do you ever forget to? I don't mean to get personal. You ever forget to brush your teeth at night?
I'm sure I have.
Well, have you in recent memory?
Not in recent memory. No, I'm no longer a college kid, and I'm not really partying hardy until 2 o'clock in the morning anymore, Jim. Sabina.
Do you know, by the way, before you get started, this is relevant to this discussion. You may not know this. Do you know that in much of New Hampshire they don't have sidewalks? Do you know that? Are you aware of that?
I am very aware of that,
Okay, just want
Jim.
to be clear. Sabina, I'm sorry, in Brookline. Welcome to the show. Hi.
As you're talking about sidewalks, I'm driving on a rough road.
Beautiful.
I was calling. I didn't know if flossing was included in this. But
go right ahead. Go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so people who floss and fling debris up onto the mirror.
Oh, I'm so with you. That is a great addition to our discussion. Go ahead, Sabina.
Yeah,
that's all I have to say. That's my pet peeve, an absolute no-no in my house.
You said it
It's
beautifully.
an electric toothbrush problem. I think if you put the toothpaste on and then you turn the brush on before you get it in your mouth,
We
then you
got to
have
turn it on when
toothpaste.
it's in your mouth.
Well, that's right, but people forget to do that, Jim, and then they have these bad results that apparently bother you a lot.
Can
I'm
I
gonna
ask you,
play
wait,
this
I have a
David
question
Letterman thing.
in a second. But I would just have a Sabina-related question about floss. Do you ever floss in the car?
No, I do not, Jim.
Tell
you
the
need
truth.
two hands
you
to
closed
floss
your
in
eyes.
the car.
Well, you're at a red light, for example. You never flossed at a red
No,
light.
I have not. I've been asked many times by you if I have to have floss in my pocketbook, and no, I generally do not.
I do
carry
ask
floss.
you if you carry floss
You do.
with
I mean,
you.
you've got a floss thing going
How
on.
satisfying? It's not as satisfying as a Q-tip.
Oh, I'm accused of flossing in the bus lane.
But let me, in all seriousness, how satisfying? How good does it feel to floss? Is it
Flossing
great?
is very nice.
It's really good.
But then
isn't
they
it?
also have those things you get at the dentist, those little
those
things you put
picks.
between your teeth. Are they as good as a Q-tip, Jim?
Oh
The
my
texture
God!
wants
No,
to
they're
know.
not as good as Q-tip, but they are really good. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I want to hear what David
Sabina,
Letterman
thanks. Oh
did
yeah.
about toothpaste globs. This is one of when David Letterman years ago when he was on the great late Johnny Carson late night show, and we have it ready to go. Here it is.
If you let those little globs of toothpaste harden in your sink, no problem. They make a fine after-dinner mint. Keep a bowl around the house for the friends.
Keep it
That's
fine.
pretty good. By the way, we just had a note to us from one of our coworkers. It was a race, which means it must be true, saying that you floss in the morning meetings of the staff while you're on Zoom. Why did they say it if it's not true? You look a little nervous. Jamie is who we're talking about. And one of the coworkers said it hits the camera while he's flossing in the middle of a morning.
That's nice.
What's the direct line to HR? Do you have that number or do you not? 877-301-8970. We're talking about all things toothbrushing, inspired by the excellent advice given by Meredith Goldstein in the, the Boston Globe.
Jay from Lowell says in order to save time in the morning, he brushes his teeth while eating breakfast.
Kara in Situate, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, I worked with a lot of J1 students at a resort, and they thought it was really gross that Americans don't brush their teeth after lunch, because you're supposed to brush after every meal. So
No.
After every time we had lunch, they would all go in and they brush their teeth, and I felt so disgusting that I started brushing my teeth at lunchtime too.
But wait a second. Who says you're supposed to brush 3 times a day? I mean, if people have 3 meals, what's with that?
Well, you're supposed to brush 3 times a day.
I thought it was twice a day.
Who says 3? Where'd you get this? Where was this?
Kids
Kara?
from the kids she works with.
The dentists from South America and Europe. Maybe
Well-
in all European countries, you can see their teeth. Their teeth are kind of gross. But it was the majority of the J1 students on their work visas, they all brush their teeth after lunch.
Okay, well, it was news to me, I have to say, on those
I think you
visas
should pull up
there.
the rules of the American Dental Association.
Well, she's saying it's like another country kind
Americans
of thing.
do have pretty good teeth.
They have visas in the United
compared
States.
to
and
other
they're-
countries.
Is that true?
I think so. I think, we're known for having better teeth, whiter teeth over here.
Do you believe, by the way, this is not our topic, do you believe Medicare does not cover dental?
No, it's horrible.
I mean, is that
It's
like
absolutely
sadistic?
horrible.
And Bernie Sanders, to his credit, was trying to get it included a couple
what
of
are you
years
supposed
ago.
to do if you're down on your luck and you're 85 years old and you have a tooth problem? You're supposed to just live with it?
And which leads to heart problems and
Yep.
other kinds of things.
Okay, here's a texter who says, toothpaste in the sink drives me nuts.
Me too.
My husband and I have separate bathrooms or else I'd kill him. Possibly just maim, but murder is definitely on the table.
Did people at the Herald brush their teeth in the middle of the day in the bathroom there? Or what
I
did they do?
never saw anybody at the Herald brush their teeth in the middle of the
Never.
day. I've seen them at GBH.
You have?
Yes, I have.
Like who?
Well,
Okay,
you always ask
why
me
can
those
you?
things.
Why say who?
You
I
ask
mean,
me
if they
those
do
things.
it, they're obviously proud of it.
Yeah.
Jamie. Is it Jamie?
No, it's not Jamie. He's not in
It's
the
obviously Jamie.
We don't have co-ed bathrooms
Jamie.
at
It's Jamie,
at GBH.
obviously. So,
Zeta
that
from
is
Worcester, what do you think?
disgusting.
What do you think, Zeta?
Oh, that's a good point. Nicole's, excuse me, 1 second, Zeta. Jamie was stuck in the bathroom. Remember that a few months ago? And Nicole is suggesting, which I find to be totally credible, he was brushing his teeth and he was embarrassed.
Yeah.
And he was locked
Jamie
in.
was locked in the bathroom. Oh, and those
Look at him now. Look how nervous he looks. Look at the guy. That is called guilty as damn charged,
He
my
says
friend.
he's charging us defamation, Jim.
Sorry, Zeta.
Defamation.
Take it away. What's up?
I have 2 points for you.
Please.
Which is more disgusting, to have somebody brushing their teeth and spitting in the sink, or talking to somebody with food between their teeth?
Oh,
You can't move
that's
your
pretty
eyes
bad.
from
That
there.
is horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
And Zeta, you raised an
Spinach
interesting
is the
question.
worst.
If you're speaking to someone with whom you have a good relationship and they have a whole bunch of crap in their teeth, do you feel it's your obligation to tell them, or what do you do?
I do.
You do?
I do tell them. Yeah, I do tell them.
How do you do it in a nice way? What do you do?
I just point to my teeth and I tell them, you have something there.
Yeah. Spinach.
I like that. I like your style there.
That's
Zeta.
really tricky.
Spinach is a real
It's
problem.
really tricky. And
It depends on my relationship. If I know them very well, I would tell them. But if it's a formal relationship, I wouldn't.
Now, Zeta,
The other
how...
thing, which is very, yeah.
No,
I'm
you
just
go
gonna
ahead,
ask
Zeta.
you the
No, let
correct
Zeta
way
go.
to remove the food in your teeth. What do you?
You ask the person who
what do you do
tells you
that?
to floss for you.
Is that what do you do, Zeta, about that?
Well,
How does the person that's got something stuck in their teeth remove it, according to you?
Well, they have to use their fingernails or something.
Yeah. Okay.
That's disgusting. Zeta, what was the other thing you wanted to say?
The other thing, which is really important about bad breath, it's not the teeth that people need to brush. Like if you're drinking coffee or you're drinking wine and alcohol, it's your tongue that
Yeah, you're supposed to brush. We haven't
Supposed to
talked
brush
about
your
that. You're
tongue.
supposed to brush your
Very
tongue.
important, yep.
Zeta, that
your
was an
tongue.
excellent, comprehensive dental call. Thank you for making it. We really appreciate it. Do you ever brush your tongue?
Yes.
Tickles, doesn't it?
You brush your tongue and the roof of your mouth. You're supposed to do both
Brush
of them.
the roof of your mouth?
Absolutely.
I've never heard of that in my whole life.
Well, get with it,
Wait
Jim.
a second. Every time you brush your teeth, you brush the roof of your mouth?
Yes, I do.
With an electric toothbrush?
Yes, I do.
I'm speechless.
Well, let me ask you,
I'm
what is the
speechless.
point of doing your tongue if you don't do the roof of your mouth?
Well, I don't do my tongue. I didn't want to admit it. I don't do my tongue that often.
You don't do your tongue.
I don't.
That is outrageous,
I hire
Jim.
somebody to do it for me, actually. They come in, they do it. and-
Okay.
And why do you? What is the point of brushing your tongue? I know
Because
I
I
said yes.
think that the
Thing
plaque
accumulates?
and things that build up are your whole mouth. It's not just
How many
your-
people in the audience brush their tongue? Oh my! I'm stunned.
Yeah.
I am stunned.
Listen to you. You're so high on your horse about dental flossing.
Well, let me
and
tell you,
brushing
if you
your
were as
teeth.
focused on dental floss as I was, you wouldn't have time to think about brushing your tongue.
Okay, let's go to Lou in Arlington. Hi, Lou.
Hello, Lou.
Hi.
Hi.
If you recognize my name, don't. If you recognize me, oops. Sorry, my speaker was on. So I'm using an alias because I don't want to embarrass my husband. But
Oh.
He has got the worst breath in the morning.
Oh.
no.
And this like crusty stuff on his lips. And,
Oh.
and he didn't know. And after we started dating, and
Yeah.
I, saw him first thing in the morning for the first time, I thought, what is this? And we have doctors in the family. I thought this has got to be like a biology thing. Because I had never, we were in our 30s. I'd never seen anything
God.
like that. And so I just told him, and he was completely unaware. He thought that's his normal. So, and it turns out he has very acidic saliva. We finally got a really good dentist who told him, this is what you do, and, it's causing your enamel to erode and all this. It was a big problem. But I thought about all the people who'd broken up with him, and I thought,
oh, no.
I'm the lucky one. We've been married almost 40 years. and
That's
I
a
thought,
beautiful story. That is a beautiful story.
Yeah,
Lou, what's your real name? What's your
no,
real name?
I'm not going to tell you.
What's his name?
No, don't tell him.
tell you.
He always tries to do that.
You're not telling us.
Yeah.
Well, that is a really uplifting. What's that?
Yeah. Well, when you've had me on before, people around town would tell me they heard me, and I just feel like I need to protect.
That's right.
No, when it comes to something like this.
If any of his old girlfriends around don't know who he is. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be horrible.
Don't answer. Don't answer.
Okay,
any
we got
questions.
it, Lou. Lou, that was an excellent story. Thank you for sharing that. Even in anonymity, it was a beautiful story.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about flossing at a Red Sox game? I've seen that.
No,
the guy
that's
sitting
not
a few seats
true.
over from me got deep into flossing at
That
the
is-
games.
that is horrible.
Stephen in South Yarmouth says he'd only floss in the car if there was a floss lane. Mike in Arlington says, one thing my wife does that bothers me is she walks around while she flosses, which is fine, but I end up finding used floss strings lying around in random places in the house. And this other person says their niece wanders around her house, toothbrush in mouth, brushing her teeth. She answers the door brushing her teeth, no matter who's there. Disgusting.
Want to hear another interesting story about
Sure.
someone fairly famous?
Yep.
When Matty Siegel was inducted, I think, into the Massachusetts Broadcast Hall of Fame, I had him on television when I was still doing my television show. And so I called his lifelong work partner, Billy Costa, to say, do you have a story about Matty that people don't know? I just thought of this as we're doing this. And he did, and I confronted Matty. You know what he does?
Brushes his teeth on the way to work.
No, not quite that. What did he do? He's not doing the morning show anymore. He would brush his teeth while he was peeing in the morning. What do you think of that? That is really skillful.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff texted about that, but I'm not going to read it, Jen.
We do?
Well, that's
as far as we should go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. People in that Boston Herald went up to the roof to brush their teeth, Jim.
By the way, did people understand what you were talking about before?
There was a couple that was on the roof having sex.
Having sex.
Yes.
And the reason they had to block the view from 93 is because people were pausing their
They were
cars
stuck in traffic
to watch the two people.
Yeah, it's a rush hour. It was in rush hour, and the Herald, before it moved, used to be located at the intersection of the Mass Pike and 93.
Where Ink Block is now.
Yes, so that when you would be sitting in traffic,
you could see
and you
them
would
having
look over,
sex.
and oh my goodness, it was very exciting. And then finally the boss blocked the access to the roof.
So the only thing you were able to do on the roof was floss. That was the new rule.
Well, you couldn't get to the roof anymore at all.
Let's go to Z in Waltham. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Z, thank you for calling. Hi.
Jim and Marjorie, greetings. Such a pleasure.
And for us too, Z. What's up?
Okay. I have a terrible gag reflex, which limits me to brushing only the front of my teeth.
Oh.
As soon as I put the toothbrush back there,
sad.
Gag right away.
Yeah, that's great to know.
My dentist hates me.
Yeah.
So the way I've solved this is brushing my teeth in the shower seems to tone that down, the gag reflex. And mouthwash.
Yeah.
Tremendous amounts of mouthwash.
Well, go ahead. I think you've gone too far already, Z. But go ahead, keep going.
Passionate about this
go ahead,
subject.
Z. What else are you going to say about mouthwash?
Mouthwash is the best. I mean, by all means, use it and use it often. It takes care of the gag reflex really well for me.
And let me tell you, that's about as good advice on the gag reflex I think I've ever heard on public radio. That was beautiful, Z. Call anytime. We really appreciate it.
You know, dental
Who doesn't have a gag reflex?
Dental
Well, the
floss
dentist.
is made of plastic, you know.
What?
It's made of plastic.
It is not.
Yeah.
It's not string?
I don't think it's, I think it's plastic.
Well, I think it depends on your whatever thing.
We have people that are concerned about brushing their dog's teeth. Do you brush your dog's teeth?
Well, it's my kid's dog. It's really hard.
Really
even
hard.
though one of the dogs is really sweet. Well, they're both wonderful. One has a temper, and neither of them like having their... Does any dog like their teeth brushed?
I don't. My dog did not.
But you know you got to do that because it's important to your health
Very
beyond
important.
just your teeth. Yeah,
Abby from
exactly.
Salem, I trust she is joking. She
What's she
says she
saying?
brushes once a week, whether I need to or not. Once a week, she
Let's
says.
hope that
and
is
flossing,
true.
what the heck is flossing?
By the way, when we were
Proxy
young...
brushes. What are proxy brushes?
What are proxy brushes? Yeah, I've heard that. I think my dentist...
Somebody texted about them.
Do you have a good dentist?
I have a great dentist.
Fahim Rasool is my dentist. I have to say in Brookline. Greatest dentist. And his family and his colleague. I mean, they really are
Mine is
incredible.
Dr. Serrano in Brookline.
In Brookline?
She's wonderful.
I would say Dr. Rasool is probably better than Dr.
think
Serrano, I would argue.
Dr. Serrano told me not to go to your
No
doctor.
disrespect meant to Dr. Serrano, but Dr. Rasool is really one fine. So there's a proxy brush. A proxy brush just has like a little... Oh, it's like a pick. It's like a whatever kind of thing.
It's a pick between your teeth. Yeah,
It's a
between
pick
your
kind
teeth.
of thing, yeah.
Yep. If you wear Invisalign, you need to brush after every meal, even
Why
when
is
you're
that?
at a restaurant.
Why is that?
I guess because things get stuck in your teeth.
Can I tell you something? Let me just say this right now. It is bad enough to brush at work when a coworker walks in. If you were a restaurant paying money to eat and you walked in the bathroom and someone was brushing their damn
People
teeth,
have that Invisalign.
how would you react to that, Marjorie?
You would say that these people have Invisalign. They're trying to straighten out their teeth, and they need to
I
do
don't think so.
what they want to do. Somebody else says, Jackie from Rockport,
What'd she
you
say?
have biofilm all over your teeth. Did you
What
know
is
that, Jim?
biofilm?
Even if you brush, biofilm will start covering your teeth in a matter of just hours.
Oh, wait a second. We have a former nurse who wants to talk about brushing your tongue, and I could use that advice. Ann in Cape Cod, quickly, what do I not know?
Okay, the trick to brushing your tongue is you have to go back as far as you can. And I'm sorry for that guy with the gag reflex.
He's got a problem.
But But you have to brush way, way back.
Way back.
That's the secret. Way back.
And why is that, Anne, retired nurse? Why is that, Anne?
Because that's where the bacteria is sitting that's causing the bad breath.
Okay, what about the roof of your mouth?
How about the roof of your mouth, Anne? What about that?
I don't know. That's a new one on me.
Really?
I can't comment on that.
So is it possible Margie's been doing that for decades for no reason?
I'm ahead of the curve.
You apparently are.
I'm
and
taking
that was
no chances
excellent advice.
with my biofilm.
Thank you very much. We really distinguished ourselves. We should be proud of the last couple of minutes.
I have defilmed every day. Okay, we're done.
We're done.
This was your idea.
Do you ever brush your teeth during lunch? We had 12 o'clock. We have a 6-minute break.
We do.
Do you ever brush teeth?
No, I don't.
Why are you not looking at me? Obviously you do.
Twice a day, 3 times if I'm going out.
Yeah.
If you're going out somewhere at 5 o'clock,
sure, you got to brush teeth.
You gotta do so 3 times a day if you're going to do something.
Well, that's interesting. No, it is. Really.
Thank you, Jim.
Glad you told us that.
Okay.
That's it.
We're done.
We're done.
Keep up with this 24/7 way of our podcast. It was your idea.
It was not my idea. It was Meredith's idea. Your hero, Meredith Goldstein.
And you said, let's do it.
Okay, fine.
And we've done it now.
Marjorie, the choice was toothbrushing or no sidewalks in New Hampshire. And I said we did that yesterday. We're not doing it 2 days in a row.
Okay.
Okay, I got to get out of here.
We got a lot of nasty texts from New Hampshire, and I can't blame them because we were giving them a hard time yesterday.
Not me.
I want the tolls, Jim. I'm sticking to it.
Let's
Anyway,
get to
tomorrow, we're going to be airing live special coverage of the Supreme Court's hearings on presidential immunity for former President Trump. So you can hear that. After that, we're going to be joined by former Suffolk County Sheriff Andrew Cabral and MIT economist John Gruber, plus our tech guru Andy Ihnatko. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna, who spends time in the bathroom doing weird things. We don't know what that is.
I think we do know.
Thanks to our BPL staff.
Actually do know.
Mitzi Geyer, Matthew Glover, Carly Corcoran, Isabella Karen, and Tina Cassidy. Thanks to our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lennox
How about
Hotel.
thanking the people that actually showed
up? And also,
up?
thank you people who came down to the Boston Public Library. Very much appreciate that as well. Okay, the Culture Show is right after us. It starts right after the 2 o'clock news here in 89.7 GBH. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thank you so much again for tuning in. Thanks again to the folks.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Carmen. This program features the return of Yorma Ello's Carmen, filled with passionate dancing and timeless human storytelling, set to Rodion Chedrin's score after Georges Bizet, performed live by the Boston Ballet Orchestra. The program concludes with one of the most recognizable moments in classical ballet, Kingdom of the Shades, opening April 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And Boston Design Week, a 2-week festival with 70 in-person events, now through May 5th, including home design, future challenges, and more. Boston Design Week is proud to partner with WCRB. Learn more at bostondesignweek.com.
Classical Radio Boston is WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston, WGBH-FM HD2 Boston, WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole, WJMF-FM Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
Yeah, we've got 60 degrees in the city right now. Might see a few showers, maybe even a rumble of thunder. It looks like things will clear out just as our spring membership drive is ending at 7 o'clock tonight. Thank you for participating and connecting with us, 888-995-9272 or classical.